walkway that really comes from the south on 2nd, 5th, and 7th, the existing pathways, and then from the east, west, and also from the north. And sort of it ends in downtown. There's no distinct pathway, so there's a gap. So we acknowledge that, and our plan, and the plan we created with everybody's input, try to fill this gap with what we were recommending. And same thing with sidewalks. If you go to the next slide. So there are obviously concrete sidewalks, ADA compatible sidewalks on Main Street and some of the North-South Street, but there's a distinct lack of that, especially in Galena, and majority of granite as well. So that was something that was acknowledged, and again, we try to address that in this project. And we also collected the traffic counts and speed during the promenade and after the promenade at 4 locations. And this data is really telling. For example, on Granite Street, when the promenade was open, yes, the traffic volume did increase, but you can see that the speed is lower on the Main Street when compared to when the promenade was not there anymore. So there was a lot less traffic, but there were in a lot higher speed on Granite. So that was one really interesting data we got. And then there are also a lot of other information you can glean from this data. For example, overall, the Main Street, during the promenade, the speeds were lower, even on Main Street west of Madison, whereas it is higher when there was no promenade. So there are a lot of information that you can get out of this data. And I'll hand it over to Aaron for the next chapters.
Great, thank you, Sagar. So my name is Aaron Villeray. I'm also with the Tool Design team. And so I want to talk through the design framework and the street types. And so as Sagar mentioned, this is really, where we got to put pen to paper and try to put the plan into action. So this is chapter 3. There we go. So what we really wanted to do is to take this goal of how to design complete streets and really operationalize it and find a way help find a way for the town to actually, apply this framework to streets. And so we started by developing this sort of modal list of designing for all users. And really what this list is meant to emphasize is whether it's the town or consultants or private developers, that when you approach a street, who you should be considering first and how you should be thinking about priority. And by doing this, you actually can provide complete streets that are better for all users, but really by centering people in this order. So really thinking about the vocation of downtown Frisco is really about access and destinations and economic life and social life. So really starting at this idea of centering people walking and rolling, and how do you provide safe and comfortable access? Everyone who comes to downtown Frisco is at some point a pedestrian, and so really emphasizing priority. Then the next down the list is so you begin with how do you provide access for people walking and rolling, then you move to people bicycling and riding transit. How do you serve those shorter trips, those active modes, and those with significant safety needs as well? And so what does the infrastructure and street design and operations look like to really support their free movement and mobility? Next is freight. And this is really important, that freight really powers the local economy. It's the lifeblood of downtown areas. So how do you really provide short-term access to businesses and households? And so that's sort of the next one. And then finally, people driving, and specifically prioritizing people going to rather than through. And so access to local businesses and destinations is prioritized over through travel, that it's less about driving through town quickly and more about enjoying it as a destination and as a cultural hub. And really how this hits the ground is we like to think about it as designing from the outside in, that downtown is a destination. So you start at the side of the street and you work your way in and you accommodate people as you move in. So what's on the sides of the street? It's often businesses or residences, destinations, parks, and you really think about, first, how do you prioritize pedestrians? How do you create enough space for walking and safe access and the social life of the town of Frisco? And then you move in to think about those curb access needs, and how does the bus get to the curb and meet transit riders? Is there a bicycling facility provided at the edge of the street, or is it parking or loading or some other need? And then finally providing that through movement function. So it's not about excluding any user, but it's about making sure that users are prioritized and balanced in sort of the correct order so that you have a comfortable environment for all. This is sort of an order of operations. So starting with that framework, that modal pyramid, we then established new street classifications for the downtown street network. And the reason for this is to take what's in the town code and what's in the design standards, and to create a set of classifications or street typologies that really work for downtown and are context sensitive. And so we assigned types to each of the streets in downtown, each of the blocks, and then those types are actually what you see in the cross sections throughout the rest of this chapter. And so Granite is a downtown collector street, Galena is a downtown local residential street. So that title starts to emphasize each of their different characters. The north-south avenues are classified as local commercial streets. There's sort of that transition between the main street and the side streets. And then finally, you have downtown alleys, which are really back-of-house access. And so some of it is just clarifying function that's already existing and creating space to develop the street network for the future. And so I want to talk through how these street types are applied. So we saw that the functional classification, since that applies, there are 5 street types in downtown, and we really illustrated 4. Main Street, because it was so recently reconstructed and has a very strong identity. We talked about it in the plan, but we're not really going to talk about it that much tonight because we feel that the design is supporting use. So we really wanted to focus on what the town public really emphasized to us during the charrette and during the refinement survey, which is Granite, Galena, side streets, and alleyways. And so what we do in each of these street type chapters is set out a cross section, which is sort of the base cross section of the street, and then give some criteria, some information about what the design speed and sort of how quickly vehicles should be moving on that street, what the anticipated traffic volumes are, what the driveway and curb access characteristics are like. So this is the downtown collector street, which primarily applies to Granite Street. So this is speed is still low, definitely no more than 25 miles an hour is the desired posted speed. It's still a downtown street. It has slightly higher traffic volumes than some of the other streets. Low driveway frequency. It's a collector, so it's serving some through function, but it's meant to be sort of a calm street through town. And then on-street parking is a mix. That this is really transitional, between the downtown, where the emphasis is on short-term access, and some of the residential neighborhoods that are south of the downtown area. And so there's the option for a mix of short and long-term parking. And then freight and load-in should primarily be happening via alley. And so then we also wanted to provide some, we put together example plan views to show how the cross-section applies and how it can blend perhaps with existing infrastructure. A lot of this is trying to formalize development that has happened sort of on a more emergent or ad hoc basis over the past decade especially. And so it's trying to show how this cross-section can be applied and can be sort of adapted to different contexts and what the key pieces and design parameters are. And so this really illustrates the south is on the bottom, how the pathway is recommended to be configured on the south. It's really a transition. Main Street is to the north.
Aaron, if you can hold on a sec, I think we lost your voice. Audio.
Nope, nothing. I know, he's creating a cliffhanger. No.
Soccer, can we hear you?
Test,
dear?
test.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, there we go. We got Aaron back too. I think we had Aaron.
Oh,
There you are.
can you hear me?
Yep,
Yep.
you're back.
Okay. Feel free to interrupt. I apologize. I don't know what happened, but I can always switch to my computer audio if needed. All right. The downtown local residential street applies to Galena. So again, this is the sort of the same general format, that this is the cross section of the street. The speed is lower. This is something that we heard is just a common condition, that speeds are lower. There's lower vehicle volumes because there's much less network circulation and access on this street. There's higher driveway frequency. It has a more residential, rural character feeling than Granite. The on-street parking characteristics are primarily long-term that we see. And so a lot of this cross-section aims to really formalize existing parking behaviors that are happening on that street and making sure that you have a safe and accessible street condition. And again, parking and loading happens in the alley. And similar to the approach with Granite, the sidewalk is in this case configured to the south side of the street, and that's the side nearer to Main. And that's again to sort of emphasize that transition from more commercial to a slightly lower density residential to try to create that more gradual movement away from the main street. And again, this is just a little more explication of what a typical block looks like, that the path is on the north side, sidewalk is on the south side, and parking and curb use are formalized, and there's some opportunities for vegetation and some urban design elements. Moving forward, so this is the downtown local commercial street. So these are the north-south avenues. We specifically created a cross-section that applies to streets with the Frisco pathway connections, that we want to make sure to close that active transportation network gap through the downtown area. And so these are sort of the north-south streets that you expect to see, especially bicycling north and south. And so that's what this cross-section applies to. It's sort of an overlay, if you will, on the existing cross-section. So parking is anticipated to be short-term. It's often surveying access to Main Street function. Speeds and volume, speeds are definitely lower, as again, it's serving that local access. Volumes are maybe a little higher than you might see on Galena. And again, to sort of show how this interfaces with the side streets, and especially this is Main Street on the center right here, to sort of show how these streets might interact with Main. And then finally, the downtown alley, which really is meant to serve only very short-term parking and loading activities and managed loading. There's a lot of back-of-house driveway and garage access, very low volumes, low speeds. It's a single shared surface. This also has the function of being the clearway that serves fire access, that we worked with Summit County Fire to determine what they need for clear access. And so this is really intended to serve those back-of-house working functions to Main. And again, showing in plan view and just how the alleys can interface. A concern that was raised a lot during the design shred and the design refinement was intersections with the north-south avenues. And so there's some emphasis on safer crossing conditions, that as drivers enter and exit alleys, that they should be doing so at low speed, and how to emphasize sightlines and visibility to make that feel safer and more comfortable. And then finally, the plan includes an urban design palette. And this is just a selection of urban design amenities and furnishings and things that sort of serve as a guide for both private property owners and developers, and also the town, to unify the identity of the downtown area, and so provide some typical elements. And so I want to continue into how we get there, which is really the implementation strategy. And the way that we approached this was a few prongs, which is first identifying changes, or these are recommended changes to the town code in order to comply with the Complete Streets Plan, and to provide some guidance for how to essentially formalize practices among developers, and to make sure that the Complete Streets Plan, as the town sort of experiences growth and development, this identity of the town streets is maintained, and that your long-term goals are being served. And so there's some recommendations around changes to the town code to start to put the plan into action. The plan also formalizes recommended multimodal networks. So this specifically identifies which streets the Frisco Pathway and can start to connect that gap in the downtown area. So it specifically identifies Granite and Galena as key routes. And then 3rd, 5th, and 7th Avenues as sort of key north-south connections to close that gap. So these are the avenues, and Granite and Galena are where those street types would apply with bicycling facilities and multi-use facilities. And then what finally what the what the plan does is identifies and prioritizes projects. These are not, the town is not bound to implement these in this order. It is merely a suggestion based on a series of criteria of how to hopefully create the most impact out of these projects that are recommended. And we separated into 2 larger buckets. Quick build projects, which are things that can be done in the very near term. These are generally more operational or tactical in nature. And then transformative projects. And these are sort of separated into the medium and long term. And we tried to divide these into series of incremental steps. So things that can be sort of done to set up future work and to take on more transformative work over time. As resources become available. And so these are the criteria that we use to rank and prioritize projects. They're really based around funding and fundability, public support. What did we hear during the charrettes? What has been identified in previous plans? What did town staff, in their experience, what have they heard about? What do they know about as opportunities? And then, of course, really forefront in safety and comfort. Does it enhance protection for vulnerable road users, and multimodal connectivity? Does it really create that multimodal network in the downtown area? And so this is a map of the projects that we identified and prioritized. And so I'm going to just quickly run through these. First, we identified 5 quick build projects that can be done in the very near term. Some examples. One that we heard a lot about during the design shred especially was the stop sign pattern on Granite Street. And so something that can be done is a study and implementation to optimize the stop signs on Granite Street. So this is a concept that was developed just during the charrette as an example. 2 more, just really, using either paint and post or parking stops or lightweight materials. Some intersection improvements at Granite Madison, the curve that the corner that we actually heard a lot about during the public outreach portions, and that as well as Granite and 2nd Avenue, which is another intersection that folks identified as needing some attention. And then finally, a couple last ones, and I just pulled up an example from Denver to sort of illustrate how this might look. We identified some opportunities for intersection level safety improvements that can potentially be done on a quick scale at Main and Madison, the gateway to the town coming from the west. There was an idea to pilot a traffic circle and to understand how that works and how it impacts speeds and speeding entering the town. And then Galena and 4th Avenue, an opportunity to consider and always stop control and high visibility crosswalks. So then sort of in the medium term, we identified five projects that can be done. This is a mix of design work and planning work that can be done to address identified needs. And so, for instance, setting up further investment in Granite Street by doing some of the preliminary design for the corridor to really understand, what are the grade and engineering issues and how to create a unified, complete street out of Granite Street. One thing that we heard about was a desire for more transit alternatives in the downtown area. So an opportunity to do a planning study to understand service options, downtown parking policy and management. We heard a lot about parking and access to downtown and what does that look like in the future. And so that seems like an opportunity. And then typical design for the alley crossings to improve safety on alley crossings with north-south avenues. And then finally, there's one construction project that we identified, which is an opportunity sort of in the midterm to reconstruct Granite Street and to actually put that preliminary design into concrete and redevelop the area around 7th, around the 619 Granite Street parcel as it redevelops in the coming future as an opportunity to start to roll out that complete street one bit at a time. And then finally, these are some long-term projects. Full reconstruction of Granite Street can be done as resources become available, and as having the design on hand sort of unlocks that opportunity to do that in the long term. Galena Street reconstruction is sort of a similar idea that as the opportunity arises, having guidance and design on hand enables that to happen. Alley reconstruction, again, sort of as opportunities arise. And then a couple opportunities that were raised that are sort of just outside the periphery of the project area are the Summit Boulevard and Main Street pedestrian and bicycle crossing, which we know is sort of a carryover from previous plans, but was something that was raised during public engagement. And then there is 10 Mile Creek pedestrian and bicycle bridge that is in need of some attention or was identified as an opportunity for expansion to sort of knit together different parts of the town. So the plan also includes appendices that I won't dive into, but are there for review. And then finally, just wanted to put plan schedule. So tonight we're having this session. And then the end of the public comment period is planned for February 18th. And then in March, we'll be submitting the final plan. So with that, thank you again for having us. And I think we would like to turn it over for discussion and questions.
Aaron, Sagar, thank you so much. That was a great report, and it seems like a long time ago that we were in here September with sticky notes, and that looks fantastic. So just as a reminder, what Susan and staff are looking for is big picture thoughts, that priority list and how we like that. And if there's anything on there we don't necessarily want to see or have concerns with or add to, and then going to discuss them one off, but if that's the good direction, I'm sure hopefully everybody read those in the packet. And then any big changes or things we feel like were missed. But I'll kick it off with thoughts and we can kind of go scatter shot here. And if anybody has ones they want to jump in with,
I'll
go for it. Thank you.
So I'll start at the end with the project list because I'm looking at some of these, which, so let's take Summit Boulevard, Main Street, pedestrian and bicycle overpass, right? So I guess that's saying a study. And in my mind, I was like, oh, for 39,000, let's do it. But like some of these have been looked at before and have been like crossed off the list. And so I'm wondering how much, should this continue to be a priority? Should we continue to have the same discussion when we know the outcome, or are there opportunities for different outcomes? And so that's just one example. I also think that similarly, the Frisco Transit Service, I know, as long as Rick and I have been on council, for sure, we've been talking about what can we do to bring back the Frisco Flyer, and at $32,000, let's go ahead and study it. But I have significant concern that $32,000 is not even half of what it's going to cost to actually study that. So I have a little hesitation on this cost list. I think we need to go back and really put some better numbers to this. Having just gone through an RFP process, the costs are way higher than they have been in the past. So I think that needs to be cautiously looked at. One of the things I didn't see on the code recommendations is, and I know we're going to have a separate discussion on this, I believe, but it's residential parking for transit-oriented communities and looking at opportunities to shift parking requirements from high-density residential areas. And what does that look like? So not just an offsite fee and lieu program, which we should also look at, but what are opportunities for transit-oriented communities to not have to park, whatever it is, 2 parking spots per unit or whatever. Love the photography on this. All of it is of the promenade, and we don't really talk about the promenade in this. And so I would like to see us at least look at a scenario number 2 of what if the promenade comes back, right? Like all of this is great, but if we close off 4 blocks of Main Street to cars, what does that do to this whole plan? I think that's a big elephant in the room. And it drove, I think, a lot of the consideration here, but it doesn't look at that future scenario and what happens if we bring the promenade back. And then my only other thought, love the stop sign recommendations. I'm a 2nd Street to Main Street person, and I'm constantly like in near accidents at that intersection. So all along the way, I really agree with the stop sign project. My last question, and it's really just throwing it out there, is on Galena Street, when you're looking at long-term parking, it's intended for residential, but because everything else is short-term, does that push employees and long-term parking into the residential area? And if it does, what are we going to do about that? Because we don't have parking enforcement. So I would just say, I agree with wanting to do that, but what does that do in the bigger picture? And I don't think we really address that in this plan. So I'll leave it at that. And thank you for all this hard work. It's lovely. And I'm really excited to get working on some of these projects, but I think I'm a little hesitant to throw a lot of weight behind some of these numbers without vetting them a little bit further.
Jesse, would you like Tool to respond? I think Sagar could maybe respond, especially to the study cost. Their firm has completed some studies and they've shared those with us. So he might be able to shed some light on that.
Sure.
As well as how his plan addresses whether or not the promenade is in existence. Would you want to hear?
Yeah, so certainly. Yeah, we did do some background numbers on the traffic, the project cost. So we can provide the detail of how we came up with those numbers. And I think you're right. I think some of these are for the studies, and we try to keep that to, for example, the transit one is something that we have experience doing. And that's, and it really comes down to the expense of operating a service like that. And then, and it's an annual cost. So the study only, I think it can probably be done in that amount, because that's what we have done in the past for similar communities. And again, I'm really glad to share the rest of the estimates that how we came up with those costs. And as for the prominent closure or closure of the promenade, I think the plan does take that into consideration, because the cross sections that for Granite and Galena would work with, even if the promenade is there. I don't know whether you were meaning whether it becomes permanent or not, but for the traffic volume that we saw when it was closed, I think the cross section that was shown in both Galena and Granite does work. So even in all the stop signs would work, and probably when we do the stop sign study, the Warren study, we can look into that a little bit more detail if you're talking about growth factors and all that stuff, we can definitely take a look at more deeper into the part of the study that was recommended in this project.
I think the data points, especially on granite and the speeds, are really interesting, and I would just like to see that called out a little bit more prominently, in that, if you decide to do this, this is still going to work. And I think you have to read between the lines to get there, or have you very smart folks explain that to us. But I would like to see that more maybe explicitly called out and planned.
Understood. We'll do that.
I was excited to see that the data points to the promenade creating a safer downtown environment. So I was happy about that. Other thoughts, just safer. That's all I was getting at. While waiting on some people to organize their thoughts, and I don't know, Sagar, if you're the right person or if Don, but could somebody give a quick 10-second what a warrant study is and what that needs and usual timeline around that? Because I think we haven't talked about those in a while.
I could I'd actually suggest Sagar would do that one just because he is the traffic engineer.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, we would need to collect more specific data at those intersections, and then also count the number of pedestrians, which we did not do as a part of this project. And then there is you might have heard of the MUTCD guidance, the national guidance. It goes by step what analysis you're supposed to do, but it starts with collecting the data first, and it's whether it meets the requirement for a always stop or not. I think we are recommending that it does. It will likely do that, but again, we would need to collect the data to really confirm that.
There's the offhand risk that a warrant study doesn't always show you what you want to create the outcome you want, correct? Just making sure council is aware of that. That goes back to if you don't like the speeds in your neighborhood and you do a warrant study, sometimes they might go up. So, other thoughts around any of this?
I'll jump in, Hunter.
Thanks, Melissa. I was hoping so.
Okay. Let's see. First of all, great work. I know you guys put a huge amount of effort into this, and so many people weighed in, and Susan and staff just did such a great job. So first of all, thank you. I have a few questions, and if you have an answer, great. Otherwise, I'd love you to consider weaving them into your final report. And so one thing that is kind of top of mind. First of all, the data on the promenade is fantastic. I think when we reconsidered the promenade earlier this year or last year, we all have interest in revisiting that by all means. And this is the kind of data that we need to really examine if there could be a long-term fit for the promenade. And so I really liked seeing that. One question I have is, how did you incorporate being in the high country? Could you just speak to that? And, as you can see now throughout our community, the roads are covered with snow. You can't see the bike lane. I also live in the same area as Jesse and frequently travel up and down 2nd. And, we have people that love to kind of ride their bikes in the middle of the street or walk in the middle of the street. What do you have recommendations, or do we need to emphasize sort of how Complete Streets works in an alpine environment like we live in, and especially at alley intersections where people are coming out, it can be problematic when people really can't see the end of the road and the beginning of the road. So that's one thing I'd love your feedback on, or perhaps just a placeholder for your final work. I'll just kind of run through these and then turn it over to you. Granite and Madison, that I think should really be prioritized. I'm glad you called it out. It is a problem corner, as so many people have identified. So thank you for including that. Also, our council, we've talked a lot about emphasizing linking this report to the greater concept of reduced parking and encouraging. So I think that this does such a great job of moving us towards, from a design standpoint, a complete streets environment that de-emphasizes the automobile and emphasizes pedestrian and bicycling and other forms of multimodal transportation. But from a development standpoint, how do we encourage infill transit and pedestrian oriented development? And so I think that, you know, it's not necessarily the scope of this project, but we need to, as a town, and if you could interject something that helps us make that connection between the vertical built environment and the street environment. I think that that's really the next step in my mind, to get the downtown dense pedestrian and multimodal environment that we are seeking, and you know, making the code revisions to support that. In terms of the cost estimates, I totally agree. I mean, you guys do this every day, but you know, having the caveats, having, you know, ranges rather. I noticed a couple of them have pretty specific numbers, whereas some of them are like to the 100,000, and that might be helpful when we apply for grants, just to say, okay, this is a medium-sized project, and our federal grant we're going after is $500,000. So just maybe food for thought. And I think I'll just leave it at that. The high country, you know, complete streets in the high country is kind of my I'd love your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. Looks like there is an article there somewhere, complete streets in the high country, or maybe a
Mhm.
song. No, I think we definitely talked to Addison and the Public Works in detail about how snow removal will be done in this cross section. And some of the, for example, where there is promenades, sorry, the pathway side, we did not put any parking, but we instead we put a buffer so that the snow can be pushed between the travel lane and the pathway. So that space was specifically reserved for that. The other one is the other benefit of the pathway is the minimum is 10 feet, and so that a vehicular can a snowplow can get to it. So it's not like a narrow urban bike lane, which is usually 5 feet, and it's very difficult. You need a special vehicle to clear those. So I think we try to make sure that the dimensions that are recommended, that the existing equipment are able to clean that. So I think that we definitely took that into consideration. As for visibility, I think we try to use more signage and not pavement marking, and definitely not paint. For example, on Alley, the headers on each side is more material. Like if it is going to be a concrete paving of different color and not really a paint, that would be good. That will not be able to see obviously first 9 months of the year. So we try to recommend elements that are more permanent and more easy to see during the winter months. That's how we try to address those. The question about like transit-oriented development and recommending, I think if you're able to provide this complete network, it'll be easier for people not to have to drive. And I think that was definitely going to be some of the benefits of implementing this. And one of the projects that we recommended is a parking study or reassessment of the parking requirements in the code. So I think that requires a lot more detailed conversation where, like earlier mentioned, if it is a transit-oriented development, maybe you don't require 2 spots per unit. So that kind of requirement, we recommended in a study, a separate study for those ones.
Thank you.
I'll be real quick, but I think Susan and Don, I'm in full support of all of these. I think the policy changes and questions are good. The designs I like. I think there's little tweaks, obviously, that we can make as we need to as we move towards implementation. Two things that just really quickly I want to call out that I think it's in the policy recommendations on 4D, but I think there's a lot of kind of non-conforming driveways and building access, particularly on Granite Street, that I think just informing the property owners that that exists, not that we're going to do anything or come in and make them take down their backyards and put in the original parking pads. But I think so they're aware of that now. So in 5 or 10 years, when some of this starts to really come to fruition on the big picture, that it's not a surprise. And even if we can like tack that onto the title, so future owners know that some of those, and I think there's one development in particular, I think we all know, where they've made backyards out of what used to be their parking pad, and it's fenced off and they have no access anymore to that, and they're parking on the right of way. So I think just so they know that would be really important and kind of incumbent on us just to spread that word now if they aren't aware. And then I think as we look forward into this is just a small tweak. I think the one place I feel like we really missed when we redid Main Street is how the pedestrian crosswalks work, because you have to be in your vehicle in the crosswalk to be able to see traffic coming safely both ways. And it creates a really awkward pedestrian vehicle interface at those places. And I think that's the spot we can do better the next time around and learn from that mistake. But otherwise, I'm in full support of all this. And I think it's a great plan to kind of move us forward. Go for it, Andrew.
Couple
Please.
things. Yeah, don't even know where I'm looking, but to whoever did work, thank you very much. And thank you. I had a good conversation with Don and Susan with some of the detail-y questions. Couple of things. One is I would hope to incorporate in a final plan, to Hunter's point, maybe an existing conditions showing what 80 feet relative to, a photograph of existing condition, and then the line showing the 80-foot right away of what we have the right to deal with. Because if you pop an 80-foot, if we're going to use all 80 feet, or I think it's 72 on the other street, they better pull their feet in if they're sitting on the curb on their front stoop, because they're going to get run over by something. I would have liked to seen, and maybe there's still an opportunity for some short-term fixes in the alleys. I really think in those charrettes, we heard two, at least, well, at the time I was there, we heard two very strong things. One is our stop sign situation on Granite is a mess and our alleys are a mess. Hopefully through paint or bollards or something, we can make movement on the alleys without utilizing the huge numbers that are showing up here. So hopefully there's time for that. And the only other thing I had, which was, it's a pretty big thing actually, but I'd love a conversation, your hierarchy of modal hierarchy. Right now we are a car-based road system, and I understand the hierarchy was cars and then everybody else, good luck. We are shifting that, but the pyramid and the conversation and the drawings all reflect a balance between cars, pedestrians, and cyclists. But the report in the modal hierarchy makes it very clear that this is first pedestrians, then cyclists, then delivery trucks, and then cars. There's not a conversation in that section, which is the fundamental guiding principle of the report. There's not a conversation of creating a balance between and among all those people, all those users. So again, I have no problem with the recommendations in the report because they reflect the balance, but your modal hierarchy does not reflect that. As the layman reading it, that's how I see it. So I'd love to have that kind of softened up in the final report. I love fixing stop signs on Granite. I think it'd be great to reconfigure Madison and Granite. The second in Granite also is a short-term fix that I'd love to get going. I'm a little circle fatigued at the moment, and your picture did not motivate me to say that's a great idea.
I'm with you on that. The circle is a little,
I love circles, but it still didn't motivate me.
There may be room for conversation there, but we need some more conversation there. And I think that was it. But generally, this is a nice roadmap forward, subject to lots more conversations and budgets and all that stuff.
Go for it, Dan.
I don't have a lot to add. You guys have covered anything I could have thought of as I read through it. I'm drawn to the parking optimization as I look at Galena and Granite, and I think Melissa touched on this a little bit, but the whole idea of the opportunities created to revisit the parking constraints on development. So for me, that's a big thing. And I just like the idea of seeing Granite really being utilized to its fullest potential. And I agree with the observation of data points in terms of the nexus between traffic speeds, volume, promenade. I think that's going to be an interesting conversation that y'all are going to have about that. But, you know, as much as I've been using Granite, much more than I ever have, you know, with the new, I think it's a function of the GAP project. I think for me, it's implementation. So starting with CDOT, and I like that was the way that was brought up. I think that really is going to be a template for how it's going to roll down the street. And, you know, Hunter, your point about keeping people aware of as that rollout happens, it's certainly going to impact some people way more than others. But this is great. It's great to see it all happen, to see the potential for it. Very interesting, the number of studies this has the potential to spawn. So it looks like your job security is pretty solid for a while. But, you know, the parking, really to me, the number of, be nice to get a sense of the number of spots created. If you looked at this template and full implementation along Granite and then onto Galena, how many spots that is, as we look at potential development, say for Sabatini, and you know the arguments for against, you know, underground and near ground parking, things of that nature. It'd be nice to kind of keep those numbers in scope or in view, if you will. But this is great, and I look forward to talking some more about it. But it's great to see the improvements. I think Granite is good work. Thank you very much.
Rick, I haven't forgot about you. Go for it.
Perfect. Thanks. Hey guys. So I thought the report was great. I agree with you guys. Nothing earth shattering. The identifying the stop signs for the short term fixes, I think is a really good idea. What I would like to see a little bit more, even though it's a complete streets project, is a little bit more of a formal. I know we have this trails master plan, but I think we can bring some more of that into the, how do you get from one side of town to the other on the pedestrian bikeway? We've talked about it in the past. We've got signage that comes and goes. I'm sure everybody in the room there talks to someone at least 3 or 4 times a month and is asking, where is the bike path? And they're actually on it. So I guess that's wayfinding, is what I'm trying to get. Just a little bit of that, just to tie it together, especially if you're trying to get to Walmart, going the back way. The other component, Hunter, I think you hit it. We've talked about Galena and Granite, and I can't wait to see those being a multimodal thoroughfare on either side of Main Street. That said, I think getting the messaging out there that we're going to need more room, because we've already identified, based on one study, to get a bike path, a sidewalk, and a street and some foliage doesn't fit. So front loading that with the people that are going to be affected, I think is hugely important before we even start, as we start that study, I think is a big importance. So thanks for the work on it. And thanks for Susan and the team for putting it all together for us.
Any follow-up questions that weren't clear?
No, maybe just a reminder that there is going to be a comment period that is open for the public as well as council members. If you have any additional thoughts, please get them to Susan and for the public, you can send them through the website.
Vanessa, are you able to message that final public comment period on this? Oh, perfect. Good here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys.
Guys, that was great. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Is agenda item number 2, and this is the Frisco Bay Marina Phase 2 Site and Landscape Design, and Susan.
I'll stay here.
Stay there. It's all yours again. Thank you.
Phase 2.2. As you guys know, phase 1 was the big dig, reconfiguring the docks. Phase 2 is currently underway. That's our lift station, deep utilities, new marina office boater services building, as well as the fuel system. So with all these new elements, we want to make sure we're integrating everything well and allowing people to move easily and intuitively through the site. So we've partnered up with Matt Stace and Elena Scott from Norse Design. Megan's going to present here tonight. Elena could not make it. We've partnered with these guys. As you know, they've brought us this far from the master plan. They've worked on the existing facilities. They understand the operational needs of the marina. So they're sort of bringing everything together in this schematic plan that they're going to share with you guys tonight. They're also going to share rough budget estimates for the elements that they're proposing. We want you to get an idea of the cost of the total design, and we want you to get an idea of what we have budgeted. We've budgeted 680. We have that much remaining in the budget for 2022 work. So we want to show you what our recommendation is for the scope of work to fit that budget. So we're seeking your feedback both on that schematic design as well as trying to gain some consensus on the scope of work for 2022. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Megan, not Elena, sorry. You guys, I think here is here good?
Or, yeah, you just need a microphone so those online can hear you, Matt. So either at the lectern or sitting next to Susan, either.
You're
or.
welcome to sit by me.
I'll sit by you while Matt's talking. Just a second, I'm gonna pull this up.
Megan's got most of a voice, but we might answer for her if that's okay too.
I'll do my best. I just, have a deep voice today.
Megan and her family went through the
14 days ago, I'm safe. Nope, I did online, so I was all ready.
Can Megan be a co-host?
So
share screen.
I have to go back and share screen. Sorry, just a second. I apologize for the delay.
Yeah. We can USB it.
Okay. Perfect. I logged in too early.
Is it better for me to share my screen or USB it?
That doesn't work.
Let's see.
Conversation based on time. There's two motions at the beginning of the week. Yeah.
I don't know. Do I have this?
To amend the agenda. All right.
Heather? I think we're ready.
Nothing like tech to keep you on your toes. Go for it.
Thank you. Thanks, Susan. Hi to the council and our friends online. I'm Matt Stace with Stace Architecture and Interiors, and I'm joined tonight by Megan Teston with Norse Design to talk a little bit about the next steps for the Frisco Marina. Susan said my firm was hired by the town. Well, actually, before the master plan in 2018. We actually designed a building pre-master plan, pre-Big Dig. But then step down when the master plan was done in 2018. This is just for reference. And this master plan was actually done before the Big Dig was completed. And the master plan was just that, kind of a high level document. The Big Dig actually created more space than the master plan had anticipated to the eastern side of the property. Also, the master plan didn't really discuss keeping existing buildings, but we feel, you know, because of the financial implications, that keeping the existing buildings has been a good idea. Also, the master plan had a lot of the buildings closer to the water, and we've talked about getting the buildings away from the perimeter of the water and actually getting pedestrians down closer to the shoreline. So this map shows overall connections from town. Of course, there's Main Street, which turns into Marina Road. There's the bike path. There's actually a new bike path adjacent to the new Highway 9 due to the GAP project. And the whole trick is getting people from the downtown core through the marina, through the parking, and down to the water's edge. And that's a big part of phase 2. Phase 2 is actually starting at the water's edge and working westwards back up towards Main Street. But we want to make sure we take a good look at the high level schematic design. So whatever we're doing closer to the water's edge is, you know, going to be congruent with what we're doing in later phases as the funding becomes available. I'm going to turn it over to Megan to talk a little bit about circulation and the details of the schematic design.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks, council members. We appreciate your time. As Matt said, we really looked at this a lot from circulation. We've got this amazing Main Street and we've got the mountains and we also have a lake. So our main overriding goal is to connect all of that. You'll see the circulation patterns here highlighted in white. I really want to point out one of the things I think is great moving from west to east is the ability to, as we reimagine this, get the bike path away from the vehicles that go either to the south or the north of the bike path. And with that said, I'm going to kind of focus high level on the schematic design. We broke it into 3 chunks that are, maybe chunks not the best word, but 3 areas that are really kind of feasible in terms of what they're addressing. And I'm going to talk about them in that manner. And I'm going to talk about it from the west to the east, because that's how you enter the site. And that's how you get closer to the lake edge, as Matt had said. So really one of the things that we wanted to look at as we did this design is to build on the success of the marina, to build on the things that people love. This is an amazing place and we want to highlight that. We want to be incredibly thoughtful with any improvements we do in the area, make sure they work with what's existing, and also make sure that they work to the best of the ability of the dollar, but not only the dollar, but also our environment and our sustainability needs. So you'll see as we look through this design how we have kept those things and that thoughtfulness as a priority as we move through this. As I said, I'm starting on the west. As you enter the park, the intersection that you're seeing just on the very far left of the screen really is where the bike paths currently come in, and trying to make sure that we have a way for people to access the site that is separate from the vehicular circulation. And that's really one of the main things as we're reimagining the area on the west. And then as we get into the middle of the site, we're calling this the central core. This is where all the amenities are. This is where the existing Lund House is. This is where the existing Island Grill is. This is where we're proposing additional restrooms and lockers. The central core really is connecting both north, south, but also east and west. So we wanted to make sure that all of the paths through the site reflect that, and that we're giving a space for the beach, the paddleboard sports, which are off just kind of to the west and north of the beach, and then also to the boater services, which are now to the south and east of this central core. So this area really becomes a move through space, but also kind of a hangout space. We're keeping the existing game lawn that's there, it's well loved. It tends to also support a lot of the paddle sports. Currently, you'll see people on that lawn area pumping up their paddle boards, getting ready to go into the water in that direction. We're also suggesting relocating a playground in the central core area that allows people to use the space in multiple modes and not isolating children at one end of the marina and away from the lake. So we're really trying to bring that to the central core. Excuse me. And then moving further to the east, we took the liberty of naming this space the Grays and Tories lawn. One of our priorities with this lawn is to really be able to allow users to be adjacent to the water in a space that is meaningful on a day when you just happen to walk out there, but could also be meaningful on a day should the town choose to host events in this area. This space is designed to be as flexible as possible to host larger events or to just allow the casual user to be here at all times of the year. You can see it relates directly to the beach, the central core, as well as the boater services, and also further out to the east to the piers and the name, the Grays and Tories lawn. It's a gem. I mean, to have an open area that's overlooking two of the probably most well-known and beautiful 14ers, at least I can argue that, in the state of Colorado, as you're looking across a lake at those. I mean, this is unbelievable. So we want to make sure that this really becomes kind of the heart of the user space and the area where we want people to be able to congregate and enjoy that. So that's really kind of the main components of the design. A little bit more into cost now. I don't want to get too bogged down with that because, as Susan said, this is twofold. We want the schematic design. We want to understand if that's being embraced, but also to look at what can we do this year. So this is a very realistic portrayal of what we think we can do this year. You can see that red boundary that encompasses the area that we can, that we're proposing to you to have a discussion about. Is this the priority of what we want to emphasize and where we would like to put funding this year? It really, again, it really is mostly the lawn, also a picnic area, and looking at building out what's now kind of that gravel mound by the marina office, which that's existing and that will be operation next year or this year. It's 2022. So this year, this summer. I wanted to throw these images out here just very quickly in case you were wondering what I meant with like a hammock area or the shade trellises. So these are just things to get you kind of excited about some of the improvements that we're looking at. It's, this is not exactly what we're going to do, but just a little idea for you there. And with that, I'll keep this presentation short. I know we have a lot to talk about, and I will open it up because really we're here today to hear from you and your thoughts. So thank you.
Can I just ask you a clarifying question? In the estimates portion of the packet, are you pointing out with the 2022 scope, that first kind of that lawn and what you just identified at the end?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
just making sure I'm getting my areas correct.
Because that's what we've been hearing from.
Yeah, and we have, so we have 680 in the budget, so this would be slightly under.
Right.
Unless you wanted to hear what Matt had to say.
I do.
Go ahead, Matt.
Always do.
We've been hearing, and I think the staff's been hearing is, when you get out of the marina in the summer, people say, what are we going to do with that big dirt area? Now we have most of a building built. We have the turnaround. We have a sewer lift station. Thanks for Friends of Public Works, and we're working on the fuel system right now, but that big dirt area, let's get it usable. That's what we were thinking would be the priority. We look forward to your thoughts on that.
On that, do you have a sense of kind of the construction timing? How long would it take us to go to get it functional?
In terms of that first area, I'm not exactly sure how I can pull that
Like,
up.
would it be a construction zone all summer, or it would be a construction zone for May and June, and then by 4th of July, we got folks hanging out on the sod?
Well, it's kind of tight to get the thing bid and get it built this summer, especially the sod area. We are talking about turf, and we've talked with the town in terms of the sustainability of having irrigated turf, but this is like the most key area we feel in all of town for the summer. So we feel it makes sense to have turf there. That would be difficult to get installed after the hardscape this spring. So we're thinking maybe more if we could get it bid and get a contractor on board this spring do the majority of the work in the fall.
So that's why.
Not during high season, but maybe there would be some sidewalks and things of that nature.
We are not, we are not talking about having this a functional space this summer.
No.
Okay, which is
No, that would be unrealistic.
creating realistic expectations.
Yeah.
The name it strikes me as G&T or G&T lawn. I don't know if that's what you want, but
I had
it's
another
not-
idea
it's not my
besides,
favorite choice,
I
but
had another idea besides Grays and Tories, but
I mean, it's just a name, but you know,
It's
I think it's
working
not, it's
because-
a long name.
you know, that,
What was
that
your
lawn,
other, what was your other thought?
the lawn the lawn that's there now, which was called by some of the staff, the Great Lawn, you know, back in the day, it's wonderful and it's already paid for, so it should stay there. But the new lawn is going to be over twice that size. So we were just trying to delineate between, you know, the two different areas.
Is anything here new? Or is this a review of what we've seen before? As far as the schematic, the master plan, that was just, that was a review of what we've seen before, right? Okay. Then, you know, when we want to keep moving with what our budget can provide, and that's what we've got allocated, and that's what I like to use.
I thought you were gonna propose selling the naming rights to the lawn. So I
Nope.
thought that's where you were going.
Nope. I just don't like gin and tonics, so G&T lawn doesn't work for me.
Great. Dan, go ahead.
Just a quick question on natural turf. What was the conversation surrounding natural turf versus, you know, a new artificial turf for that? Where did that conversation break? Just curious.
Thanks. That's a great question, Dan. And it's still something that's definitely up for discussion today. And with you, there's obviously pros and cons of artificial turf versus real turf. The nerd in me wants to make sure that you all understand from an irrigation perspective, there's a lot of advancement in that technology and in the efficiency of the system. So should we go with a natural lawn, we can choose not only an irrigation system that's designed to be quell and water wise, we have that capability, but we can also make sure that we use a turf that is a low water use turf or sod mix. There's some that we have successfully installed in the high country, and they've been doing really well. They tend to use about a third to a half less water than a traditional turf area would. And we also would want to recommend, and it's budgeted to put in a large amount of high quality topsoil, because that will help with water retention as well as the health of a turf. We did look a little at artificial turf. One thing to keep in mind with artificial turf is the initial cost will be somewhere between 4 to 6 times larger than the budget of real turf. I would also want to make sure that we understand that usually with an artificial turf field of this size, they strongly recommend that we would still install an irrigation system as a way to maintain it, as a way to cool it. It's just kind of the recommended practice for artificial turf. So that's definitely still a topic of discussion. It's just when we're looking at budget and how to weigh things, that was one of the things we considered as looking at 4 to 6 times of the initial install. One other thing kind of that I would just like to bring up, because I meant to do it in the presentation, but I kind of got on a roll, was just the fact that we are looking not only within this park area to offset turf within the town of Frisco, but Susan and the town is currently looking at minimizing turf areas, particularly those that are not heavily used. So one of our thoughts, not only within the town, but also within this actual marina area, is to look at the turf area, which is closer to the existing playground and a little further to the west, decommissioning that as turf and looking at that as more of a xeric garden, so that we are conscious of our water use overall on the site.
Thanks. I assume there was a pretty deep dive into the.
Yeah, I could go deeper, but I don't want to bore anyone.
You know, my familiarity with it in terms of installation, small scale and fairly passive in terms of familiarity. So understanding those other requirements, I love it because it brings the park into Marina Park, and I think it's a great open space. In some of the first master plans, there were a bit more like a college quad with trails kind of cutting across the middle of it, and I didn't think that was very functional. I really like it because it frames that space, still preserves the potential for that space to be really looking at this. You can see wintertime activation here, and it's even more exciting to kind of see the hardscape around what it could be. In terms of what's embedded for any lighting and power around that perimeter, what's in there? What kind of scope of events that because you easily anticipate events down there, tents and things of that nature. What's the where you at on that in terms of infrastructure for that? That's what we
We had a 3-phase power run down to the edge of the pier. Was it a year and a half ago for the new building and also for the docks in the future. And there's going to be plenty of power down there for the pavilion that may go in the future. That's not part of the 2022 scope, but the town has that temporary stage that's resided down there for many parts of the summer in the past, and that would probably be a bit of a stopgap. But there's plenty of power for whatever's going to happen. There would be provisions put in for exterior, better exterior lighting that would certainly be dark sky compliant and sensitive to the uses down there. So we haven't got any farther than that at this time.
Yeah, and not having any any anticipated uses that I can kind of throw at you. I can tell you how it would be applied. So, but I'm just curious. I know you guys are thinking ahead.
Yeah.
In terms of the playgrounds, the plan is to get rid of the playground that's out there now, or is this going to augment? Are you going to see both? I'm just kind of curious about access to this playground during the wintertime as we talk about paid parking. Amount of families that really utilize that one playground. Incidentally, playgrounds are a bit of a premium in Frisco, and really to hate to give one up, would rather see some augmentation versus replacement. I'm still looking for a nice slide, but kids, unfortunately, but we used to scale them by the height of the slides. So, but just kind of curious on what the thoughts are there in terms of the pivot to that new play area. Is it a little bit bigger? Is it? I know we're not at that level of detail yet in terms of equipment, but what are your thoughts about utilization there off season? Be tough to get to, I imagine.
To an extent, that's been brought up. I mean, the fact that that existing playground is easy to get to. It's used in the winter. It's used a lot in the summer. Our direction was to have one playground, not two, but we could certainly look into that, leaving it, repurposing it somehow, reworking that.
Two different styles of play. One near the beach would complement the beach more. That's certainly the other playground certainly, I think, could use another piece of equipment or two, but I'd hate to lose it. And I understand it's part of your gateway there, but
Yeah, that's great feedback. Thank you.
Got his hand raised.
Oh, thank you. Go ahead, Rick.
Hey guys, I'm gonna pull up the plan here. So first off, I wanted to say thank you. When I first opened the document, I was like, oh my, it's everything again. And then you focused in on the lawn area with the borders that we're looking at. So to that end, it doesn't sound like the playground's part of the conversation for summer of 2022 improvements. Just so we're clear. And then two, the lawn itself, I agree with Andy that, yeah, let's keep that moving forward. It's a great piece of real estate. The timeline might not be what we we're hoping for, but let's move in that direction. And then forgive me, you guys, but I've been asking this question for a few weeks. So I'm going to ask Susan now is, where are we with the boat ramp rework?
Don't have the answer for
Jeff's-
that.
Jeff's coming up. Jeff's coming up to a
Okay.
microphone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember
Jeff
Rankin.
Goble, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. We are actually, the repair for that is in design right now. There's really only two options to fix this problem. One option is really off the table due to cost and disruption to the marina for a very long period of time, and that would be to rebuild the entire boat ramp turnaround area, which we're not going to do. So what we're looking at now is putting in a pumping system into the cistern that all that stormwater drains into and pump that water into the reservoir where it belongs. So that's what's being designed right now, but unfortunately, we will be dealing with that puddle this summer. And we will get the work done in the fall. Once the season's over at the marina, we will get pumps installed. Hoping that we get permission from the State Health Department and Denver Water. That's what we're working on right now.
Great. Thanks for that, Jeff. That's pretty high on my list of what's going on down there. And it's on a positive note, will not have dewatering projects going on the summer of 2022, filling it constantly. So that's a good
We
thing.
won't.
Thanks, guys.
That's it. Yeah, go for it, Jesse.
Pumps are really energy intensive. I'm just curious if right out of the gate, there's an opportunity for space for ground mounted solar to help pump those. I mean, I'm just throwing that idea out there because I know that irrigation pumps can be very, very energy intensive. In terms of the design, love the picnic area, and I would like to see perhaps a little bit more shade added, whether it's sun sails or umbrella areas. You know, I don't necessarily mean the hardscape aspect of it, but just it can be really intense down there. And when you have a big open area, you know, a lot of folks are visitors and they'll come and they'll buy an umbrella for a day and then they throw it out because that's what they do. And so, you know, unless we're renting umbrellas and promoting that down there, I think we need to provide that for people so that there isn't a need to purchase and throw away. Otherwise, love it. I'd like to see a little bit more bike parking throughout the site. At least from what I gathered, a lot of it is like right on the water's edge. And I think it takes kind of a lot of effort to get there. I think people are going to park and scatter their bikes because they don't know that bike parking is all the way out there. So perhaps a little bit more bike parking throughout the site would be good. Otherwise, I agree with everything that's been said so far.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I wish there was a better way to do grass, but I'll trust the the technology that's out there. Maybe Jeff can figure out how to pump the water from the pond into
Yeah.
the grass, and
We do that?
we can solve two of our problems.
Be able to do that, Mayor, but water rights will prevent you from doing that.
Things in the
Yeah,
big
small
picture.
things.
Yeah, we'll work through those. But yeah, I wish turf wasn't the way to go, but it is, and it pains me a little bit. But I'm in support of this for sure as it's laid out. Melissa, are you still?
Yeah,
Go for
I
it.
just have a really brief comment, and it's about what was going through my mind as you showed that picture is, you know, I'm thinking about it's very well composed, right? And I think all of us who've spent time out there can see when it gets busy, it gets really messy, right? And to the extent that we can program it through permanent fixtures like the shade structures, but also maybe permanent seating. I'd love you to think about that and in your final planning, provide some recommendations. I worry about loose chairs just being moved all over the place and kind of congregating, you know, as much as we can keep that really composed. It's kind of the beauty of the lawn without taking away some enjoyment factor, of course. I love how it looks, and to the extent that we can preserve that through design and permanent features or reusable features, maybe semi-permanent features, will be awesome.
Direction, good enough. Sounds like we're in support, and thank you.
Thank you guys very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your feedback
Appreciate
and your
it. Yep.
time.
And look at that, 7 o'clock. Goodness. I wasn't nervous. Council, just quickly, we'll maybe roll right into the general meeting, and then after the consent agenda, maybe we'll take a quick 5-minute break and then roll into new business. So good. Great. Then with that, good evening. It is 7 o'clock. I'd like to call to order the regular session of the Frisco Town Council meeting. There's been no change in attendance for council, so I will not call roll at this time and open it up for public comment. Anyone wishing to make public comment can do so now. Please be topic specific for anything that's not on this evening's agenda, and limit all comments to no more than 3 minutes. If you're joining online, raise your hand, unmute yourself, and
Not seeing any raised hands, Hunter.
great, thank you. Seeing no one in chambers, I will close public comment and mayor and council comments.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to extend the town of Breckenridge's thanks to the Public Works Department for helping with traffic mitigation for snow sculptures. We did loan, or I should say, we did message on behalf of the town of Breckenridge on our variable message signs to help people with wayfinding and traffic congestion and all that. So I promised the streets department there that I would convey that. And so here I am. Thank you.
Message received. Other council comments? Seeing none, don't believe there's any staff updates. Great, thank you. On to the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move the approval of consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda by Mayor Pro Tem Burley. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Aronson. Any discussion on the motion? Can you call the question, please?
Certainly. Mortensen,
Yes.
Aronson,
Yes.
Burley,
Yes.
Fallon,
Yes.
Held, absent, Incan,
Yes.
Sherburne.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next up is new business, but before that, I'd like to take a 5-minute break for everyone, and we'll reconvene in a little bit. 5 minutes. Thank you. Like, sorry, I should probably go by the script here. First up, under new business is agenda item number 1, and this is a strategic plan update and the 2022 project plans. And save for Diane, who could not be with us this evening, I'd like to say it's awesome to see all of leadership here and in person and healthy and for the most part, maskless. And those who are not, I understand your reasons. I know that some people have travel plans that want to stay healthy for. So
In Hawaii.
you will be in Hawaii and we will not get in the way of that. And we want you to be in Hawaii. So. But I just quickly want to, I think I'm looking forward to this, this presentation. And I think part of what we're working on tonight is a real good reminder and focus of why our strategic planning process is so important and what it provides for us as a council and for our town, for expectations of us, and then also giving all of you as town leadership a good guiding direction and to keep moving forward. And I think in this time that we find ourselves in with an interim town manager and a coming election does not mean that we stop doing what we do. And I think having a strategic plan allows you all to implement council's direction and decision-making in an efficient way. And I'm looking forward to catching up with that, seeing what that looks like. I know there's some questions that you all will have on things that might have gotten forgotten about or priorities and making sure they're still all in line with where we want to go. But I want to take that moment to thank you guys for continuing your dedication to this community and this operation. It shows, I think it's made all of our jobs easier and better. And it shows in the community that I hear it all the time. So thank each and every one of you all. It means the world to me. So appreciate that. And with that, Vanessa, I'll turn it over to you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Council. I think that's a great way to lead into this. And that is, this is not about reworking a vision or a mission or goals. You've made those goals very clear and those priorities as well. This is really about reviewing the projects that we were to have done 2020, 2021, and then looking forward through 2022, the things that were budgeted and identified to support those 5 goals and then those 6 priorities as well. And so this is really about checking in, and it's about identifying the things that you hear that you're like, oh, yeah, those were things that should have happened and or they did happen, or oh, there's something missing and we really want to know about that missing thing. We're not looking at this as a moment where we discuss every single one of these items, because even if we spend about 10 minutes on this intro, 10 minutes on each slide, 5 for staff and 5 for council, that's an hour right there. So that means that this is really about a tickler, like, hey, yeah, that's the thing that we didn't hear, or wow, yeah, that's a reminder of a thing that was done and that we worked through. And so the end game of this presentation is to make sure that we're hitting on all of those programs that support council's priorities, goals, and then priorities, and to identify any that are not here, and then to come back to you with a project plan, and a very comprehensive project plan that's based on each of those 5 goal areas with a timeline for completion, some in this year, but certainly going forward beyond that. And it's a check-in, it's not a full physical, it's a check-in where we find out if we really are on that right path with all of these with these programs. The thing I was really thinking about when I was looking through 2020 and 2021, and let me go back a second, Diane McBride did an exceptional job of putting this together and doing a lot of research along with Callie's support and along with this leadership team support. And she was very clear on Friday that she wanted this to go forward because she feels like we need to make sure that we're all on the same page and that council understands that those programs continue to move forward and those projects continue to move forward during this time of transition. So I'm a poor substitute for her, but we are here to make sure that we know that those projects are moving forward and that we know that you that you understand that we're on the right road. In looking through 2020 and 2021 and any things that weren't completed, I really got to thinking about the things that we need to remind ourselves about what's been happening in 2 years. So March 5th will be the 2-year anniversary of the first positive identified case of COVID in Summit County, 2 years. And I remember talking to Nancy Carey, our town manager at the time, and we were like, we're going to shut down, I think it was around the 12th, but we'll be back in the office in 2 weeks. That did not happen that way at all. And I want to remind this council of the things that you've gotten done. I mean, you implemented and made happen. We implemented 4 grant programs for a grand total of $875,000. And we did that, a lot of that, you did it in April. The first case was in March for that first grant program. Then we did 3 more grant programs at the end of December 2021. I mean, really hit it hard. I'm sorry, end of 2020. It's like so hard to keep the dates clear at this point because it seems like everything went fast and slow all at once. Remember that you also started an Eat, Stay, Play local bonus card program, and you generated over $400,000 in spending with an investment of $125,000. So while we were working on all these other projects and you were deciding on all those other projects, this was happening at the same time. You also stood up 2 promenades during that time, gave us the direction to make them happen, and they happened, along with a very robust parklet program. The list goes on, like Hay on Sand and messaging and 22 businesses approved as part of the 5-star program. All of that was happening in 2020 to 2021. So I think it's important for all of us to remember that you were doing all that at the same time and that took a lot of time as well. And then we still got a lot of stuff done, which is pretty amazing. And then why did this the PowerPoint totally disappeared? Oh, you're gonna get back for me. Yay, this computer, it's not my thing. So progress report, like I said, for 2020, 2021, those 5 areas I call them the goal areas, the 6 priorities. And then Diane had identified going through their 18 additional priorities for 2020, 21. And then for 2022, I counted through it and it was approximately 54 projects to support those 5 goals and 6 priorities. So just a reminder, I think we're channeling our inner Nancy Carey right now. She loved this, and there it is, the vision and those 5 goal areas, and then of course, the 6 priorities. So what are those next steps? So continuing ahead with 2022 and continuing to focus on those 5 goal areas, look at it through that lens, any project that we do, looking at those 6 high priorities, and then for us, reviewing the feedback you've given us and making sure that we come up with a project plan that makes sense and supports those goals and priority areas. And then for council, Diane made sure to put this in here. There's an obvious transition that's going to happen. This is a time period now in the next 2 months when we know that we will have at least 2 new council members. And so there's a council retreat planned for May or June 2022, and really focusing not only on the visioning and the goals, but also on the all important team dynamics and team building, which has been remarkably difficult for every team, I think, across the whole world over the last 2 years. So we're going to break it down by individual goals, those 5 goals. The first slide will always be 2020 to 2021. The next one will be 2022. There's a lot of overlap, certainly, but again, this is supposed to be something that's a tickler, like, oh yeah, ooh, I remember that thing. It's good that they're doing that, or it's good that they've done that, or ooh, there's something that I want to make sure that we talk about. And as council gives us feedback, we'll make sure to include that either in a conversation that we have later, if it's something that warrants a longer work session, or something that makes it back onto that, that project plan if it's not on there right now. So we're going to bounce around a little bit. So social equity plan. Can we start with you there?
Yep, sure. I thought that was
quick.
Yep, great.
Stay right there.
I'm staying right here. Okay, great. So there was a social equity plan, and that was put on pause, as I believe you guys all are aware of. And our goal, if this is still a focus for the council and the mayor, is that that we would pick this back up 6 months after the new town manager is in place, so that they are very involved in it, as it's a very heavy town component with obviously a people employee focus as well. So this would be 6 months after the town manager is in place with a 2023 specific focus.
Don, the next part is yours.
And I'll stay sitting here too, if that works. Are
Works.
you running the?
Happily.
You are, okay, great. So the next one was a council high priority goal, and that's kind of a generally defined goal of increasing full-time residents to 50%. And we had a good discussion about this originally back in November of 2020, if we can remember. It was about 1.5 years ago. And at that point in time, we said, well, you know what does this actually mean? What is the purpose of increasing full-time residency to 50%? And I think the general idea behind it was, and the intent of it is, let's make our neighborhoods continue to feel like neighborhoods. There was some concern about changes to the neighborhoods because of second home ownership, short-term rentals, and some other things. Well, as we also saw during the pandemic, we did actually see an increase in some of our full-time residents. They were Zoom economy. So how does that actually impact our workforce housing? Because I think that was maybe the underlying goal, or one of the main underlying goals with this increasing of full-time residency, is making sure that there is an opportunity for workforce housing for the people that are working here in Frisco, not necessarily the Zoom economy. It's interesting when the census numbers came out, finally, they were about 1 year late or so, but when they came out last summer, it actually showed that Frisco decreased in population a little bit from the 2019 projections, which were the most recent ones by the State Demographer's Office. Our current population is 2,913 according to the 2020 census. So it went down. We're less than 3,000. I think that was a surprise to a lot of people, including myself. Some of that may be due to census methodology or undercounting or whatever else, but the underlying point is, even though that we added 230 homes, 230 new residential units between 2010 and 2020, our population went down just a little bit. So are we what is the cause of that? What is the root cause of that? And ultimately, I think what we need to do as council and staff is take a deeper look as what are we going to try to achieve with this goal of increasing permanent residency or full-time residency in Frisco. And is 50% the number? Is that a magic number? What does it mean? I think maybe shifting the focus to say we are actually trying to maintain the feel of our neighborhoods and increase the community feel of our residential neighborhoods maybe should be a little bit more of the focus, as well as tying that into workforce housing, which is one of the next big bullet points. Oh, there it is. How about that? So the 5-year strategic plan was another high priority goal of town council. And this is not something that we've made a lot of direct progress in creating a tangible plan. We don't have a tangible 5-year strategic housing plan. I think we've got a lot of parts and pieces. We've got a lot of ideas that we've started to float around. I think one of the challenges, because with housing, we take it opportunities as they come to us. 602 Galena is noted on here. That wasn't even in the 2021 strategic plan because it wasn't even a concept that came about until our mayor and one of the county commissioners was able to wrangle somebody at the state division of labor and employment and get them at the table so we could start looking at this. So we have to take some of these as we come, but at the same time, it would be very useful to develop a larger program. What are we trying to accomplish? What gaps are we trying to fill as they're identified in the housing needs assessment? And at this point in time, because again, we have not been able to develop this into a plan at the staff level, our recommendation is, because this is such a high priority, that we go out to and develop an RFP for a consultant to really help guide development of this longer term strategic housing plan. So downtown complete streets. I think we had a little discussion about that just earlier tonight, so I won't go too much detail onto that one.
We're gonna go through all these and then we're just gonna do questions per group unless you need to stop something. Okay. Questions per goal.
Okay, and as Vanessa mentioned, this is the second slide. So this is a lot of the items that are in the 22 budget or identified in the 2022 budget as projects that we should be working on. And there is a lot of overlap. We still are talking about creating a 5-year housing plan. We are working on 619 Granite, making substantial progress on that. We expect that we'll be bringing an agreement on what the next steps are and how we're going to construct and ultimately operate and own this project moving forward. We'll bring that to council hopefully in March or so. And then we have 602 Galena on here as well. Housing Helps and Housing Locals. Housing Helps, we're finally gaining a little traction. If you recall, back in June of 2021, we reconfigured that program a little bit to make it a little bit more desirable and a little bit more usable. And we have had 3 closings on that. So we're making some progress. Housing Locals, that was just something that we hadn't even thought of less than a year ago. It came about as something of an emergency, actually, because a lot of our local workforce just had nowhere to live. So how do we go about trying to create places for long-term or for our workforce to live? And the idea there was, okay, let's take short-term rentals and try to convert those over to long-term. It's a Band-Aid solution, but that might be part of a bigger housing solution as we move forward as well. And then finally, Lake Hill, we've talked about that for, well, as long as I've been in Summit County, which is almost going on 8 years now. But it's been a long-term project. It does start to be gaining some traction. According to the paper, the Summit County had a productive meeting with the Frisco Sanitation District last week. So we certainly are moving forward with it. And I think we will see some continued progress. The county is developing the PUD document. They presented that to the Frisco Planning Commission just last week. So we will see continued movement on that. That is a long range plan, and it's going to take a long-term time to develop that, but that will do a lot to alleviate some of our housing challenges. The Frisco Trails Master Plan, another one of those things that have been budgeted for 2022. There's $40,000 in the budget. We are in the process of contracting with SE Group in order to put that into motion, and so we'll be kicking that off here this spring and finishing that up in late summer. And Transportation Master Plan is an item that we've put off a little bit because of some staffing challenges that we have right now, as well as looking at the timing of the completion of the Complete Streets Plan, the Trails Master Plan, and some other things. They will actually feed a little bit into the Transportation Master Plan. So as we finish up some of those, the Complete Streets and the Trails Master Plan, those will help inform the Transportation Master Plan. There's $200,000 in the 2022 budget for this. We're anticipating working on developing the scope and putting that out for RFP later this summer. 200,000 is in the 2022 budget. We would anticipate that would take 8 to 10 months, so that would carry into 2023. And First and Main Historic Park, one other item, thanks, Vanessa. So this is something that, again, it's not identified anywhere, it's not budgeted for, but it's come up a few times. What is the future of that property where the First and Main building is? We don't actually own that building yet, but it generally comes up in the context of, can we use that property in conjunction with our property that the town owns at 113 Granite and do it in the development of housing and develop some housing on that property. I think there's several options that council has discussed. Could we increase the green space there? Do we create more art space? Do we do a mining heritage exhibit? Any number of things that could be done with this, including a mixed use building with some ground floor civic use with housing above. All of these options could be on the table, but at this point, we have not developed it or agendized it, but it is something that if council directs, we will certainly pursue a little bit as far as potential options for First and Main.
And then we'll have Leslie talk a little bit about the next item.
So childcare, providing quality, affordable childcare is really just a strategy to help maintain our current full-time residents in the town of Frisco, which we spoke about earlier. We can do that by providing a tuition assistance program, which we've discussed. So THAT has prepared an IGA that we will be bringing to you within the next month with the town of Breckenridge. And that will help us to implement the BREC model for providing affordable childcare for residents that live and work within the 10-mile basin. And that would be a temporary measure until we can implement a countywide program, which we did have a meeting today about actually to discuss the budget and how we can move forward in that, but that's still looking like a 2023 program.
We're done with inclusive community, so.
I feel a little plan fatigue. There's a lot of planning in that, and I know you guys are planners and it's good. And I don't like to make decisions without being informed, but at some point, when are we gonna like do something with
the
this?
rubber to the
And so
road.
on just, I'll use the housing by way of example. Some locals we didn't even know about 12 months ago. So how do you create a long-term plan, but also anticipate all these other things that can change within 1 to 5 years? And do we need to spend the time that it takes and the money that it takes to do a plan like that when we have an overarching goal and we can address things as they come up towards that goal? So on housing in particular, I'm struggling with, do we need a master plan? And I'm not saying we don't, I don't know where that fits. And so, and then on the transportation side, you know, I would like to see, first of all, what's the point of a transportation master plan?
So
That's different than what we just discussed today.
Sure. So part of this actually went back to a work session, I believe it was in March of last year, where we talked about, Bill Gibson gave the presentation. It was discussing, well, the last transportation master plan for the town of Frisco was developed in 1986. And so as we've been talking through Complete Streets, as we've been talking about a number of things, it identifies things like, where does transit fit in? How does parking, overnight parking on town's rights of way? How does some of those larger picture things fit into our overall use of our right of ways and how people move about town, whether it's by car, bike, foot, or transit?
Okay, perfect. I'm glad you said that, because to me, I think we need a mobility plan, not a transportation plan, because it is about language and what you use to describe the priorities. And this kind of gets to Andrew's point about the balance versus the hierarchy, right? Like, we need to make sure that we're not, to me, a transportation master plan is all about cars. No matter what the content is, it's very car and transit oriented. So, and then because if you expand it to mobility, you can do a lot of things like what Tool Design was recommending today, and that we need a parking plan and we need a few of these other things, you know, a Frisco flyer study, things like that. Can we leverage this project and address all of those at once?
That is the concept. That's essentially the concept. We haven't drafted the scope, but again, it is looking at all modes of transportation, and maybe it's a transportation and mobility plan, and we update the language from 1986 to more current terminologies.
Perfect, because yeah, there were a lot of individual plans within the Complete Streets that seemed to me could be rolled up into a master plan. That's it. Thanks.
Oh, if you could, real quick, I'll go back to the housing, and part of the biggest thing I think we're lacking in the house in not having a housing strategic plan is we have a number of we have this housing needs assessment, which is done for a countywide basin and countywide basin that breaks it down by individual planning basin at the county level. And for Summit County, that includes Copper Mountain, it includes the Summit County Commons, it includes other places. And it has these pockets, if you remember our rainbow, our circle of needs and where things fit in there. When we're doing a project, what we don't have is a really good idea of what are we trying to address? Are we filling a gap with 619 Granite? Yes, we are filling a gap, but to what extent? So we don't really have that overall picture of how individual projects that come up, whether it's something that's been planned for several years, such as 619 Granite, or something that comes up on a spur of the moment like 602 Galena. How does that fit into the overall picture of what we're trying to address with our housing program?
It's more of a gap analysis with because when you say a capital plan, it's like project A in this
Mhm.
year, project B in this year, but I'd like to see it be more flexible and fluid to address that, you know, whether it's the overarching goal of 50% residents or more to your point, specifically the rainbow spectrum, which I like,
Mhm.
versus a capital plan, which to me seems very concrete, that we shall do this in year 1 and we shall do this in year 2. And I just don't, it's too fluid for that. And the
can I
other thing I
jump in
would
on
just
that?
add
'Cause-
is how do we incorporate the vast amount of housing funding coming down from the federal level into a plan like that? How do we identify those opportunities?
And certainly, and if Leslie, you'd like to jump in as well and bring in some of her experiences from Breckenridge, but I think that's kind of what we'd like to do. Right now, we just have in the budget $5 million for 619 Granite. Well, we know we're probably not going to spend that on it, but that's what we budgeted, and we're going to look for other sources. And we might do financing to leverage that $5 million. So the idea there is to really develop. Okay, if we have an idea of the revenues coming in, we can budget for revenues that are going out on a longer term basis.
Yeah, and speaking to that, so perhaps something that makes more sense and aligns with what you're envisioning is something that Don and I actually are meeting on later this week, which is to look at what, you know, is presented in Breckenridge, frankly, which is, you know, a 10-year plan would show the money coming in, would show potential additional tax revenue, would show projects, and, you know, maybe the projects aren't named, but it at least identifies an amount that can be assigned to each project in future years. So that kind of helps to solidify and understand what we can do. And then from that, you can also match that up with the housing needs assessment and look at specific AMI units that are needed. Additionally, I just want to address vast amounts of infrastructure dollars. That makes me nervous. You know, I mean, Don and I have been diving into what it actually looks like. And so, you know, we have received an invitation to apply for a DOLA grant related to 619 Granite, but that's looking like $800,000, which is real money. But if you look at it as compared to the total project cost, that's not what's going to get us there. And we've looked at some other sources for Galena, and there might be additional things there. But we're also, that's not shovel ready. So I just want to make sure we're on the same page there. Okay, thanks.
I think Melissa wanted to.
Yeah, Melissa, go for it. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for bringing this back. I really view this as our foundation, but it also really allows us to make decisions cohesively, which you know, is hugely important. And so I'm happy to
Look, I'm still there.
revisit this. Somebody is unmuted. Thank you. Okay. The housing in particular has been on my mind a lot. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to interject and specifically the idea of a housing strategic plan, because, you know, we've had so much thought, and we don't lack the desire, right, to get projects done. However, we have had many starts and stops and steps backwards, and then start again, and then step back and then start again. So kind of false starts. And while we're ultimately moving forward with a couple very significant projects with CDOT and the workforce site, hopefully Lake Hill at some point, there are a number of, and I like the term that Tool Design used, I think they called it a quick build. There are smaller policy decisions that we have been talking about for years that we need to get them done. And you know, without going down the in the weeds as to what those are, you know, they're the low hanging fruit, right? And with our next housing manager, we need somebody that can lead us through that discussion. I'm not opposed to hiring a consultant at all, but we do lean on consultants I think there's value to that. I would want to make sure that it's not a needs assessment, that it's not something that we've seen before. It really needs to have specific information about our local projects and how we can get them done, and what to the rainbow that Eva put together so well. What are the needs that each particular project is going to meet? And so sort of revisiting the volume of work, just to highlight Eva and Dawn, that you all did last summer, that really, I felt, moved us forward. But we haven't been able to really come back to that and make much progress. And so in my mind, a strategic plan is really necessary at this point. And whether or not it's from a consultant, I think the housing manager really, we're looking for a leader that really is well versed in the full spectrum of housing types, housing financing mechanisms, et cetera, that can lead this discussion, consultant or no consultant. I think that hire should help gauge that decision. But I think it's really imperative at this point.
I think we're hearing loud and clear that a 5-year strategic housing plan makes some sense.
Or 10.
Or
That's how
10.
far out it needs to go.
Not just capital, but also policy.
I'd love to see somebody else's. I've got way more plan fatigue. No matter how much you have, I got more. But so I've got complete plan fatigue, especially when we are a 3,000 person tourist mountain town that everybody else has already done strategic plans. You know, I have such respect for the professionals that we have on staff that we don't always need to get somebody to come in from the outside, spend ungodly amounts of time and money to learn who we are and what we want, when we already know who we are and what we want. They got to get up to speed. So point being, I would love, as anytime somebody's proposing a plan, I would like to see a parallel plan done from a similar community. And then we can decide, is this something that's worth $100,000 or whatever the dollar amount is? Just to say we need somebody to tell us how to do housing. I want to understand better. Maybe it's already been done. Maybe we know how to do it without the $100,000. So that's sort of just this segment. For the previous segments we've talked about tonight, and for anything else, anytime we mention plan, please, I will be asking for somebody else's plan before you ask me to vote on authorizing a new plan. Appreciate that.
Yeah. That's Dan or Rick. Any of these or items you didn't see or?
No, I again, I echo Melissa's sentiment. It's great to see this again, because like Vanessa, just as you said, the last 2 years has been quite a detour. And to see, you know, where we were 2 years ago and actually how far the progress we made on so much of this, so I don't want to take credit for work that the staff really has done. You guys have done a great job keeping it moving on so many fronts. But you know, I circle back to housing too, and my frustration has been that it's moved forward on many fronts. The housing conversation has moved forward on many fronts, and we've evolved tools and strategies to solve problems. And while they're not linked necessarily coherently to a universal outcome, to Andrew's point, we know what we need. I mean, we know we can apply this tool to that thing, and we can do it now. I think what's missing in terms of the housing strategy is more frequent focus conversation about how we bring a specific one of these to bear. And this can all inform and evolve policy later. You know, when the housing director comes on board, I think that person will stitch together the plan based on what I think council has given direction to do. And so I look at Housing Helps 2.0 or housing locals. I mean, these are well-evolved concepts that don't need to be fleshed out much more. What they need is to be used. And $5A dollars are available now. So I think in terms of the planning, it goes to understanding immediately what our options are in terms of financing 619 Granite. You know, how much can we put into play with these other two, and how aggressive can we be? We cannot be aggressive if we think we're going to use $6 million for 619 Granite. Then we can't do anything. If we want to create capacity now, then we have to have the conversation now about alternate funding for 619. And we need to put $3 million in play for Housing Hubs 2.0. And we need to create a more aggressive partnership with property managers for housing workers. And we need to get to hotels, Main Street, whatever. We just need to say, I want 10 rooms. I want them this summer. So how much? You know, so and maybe that it's council direction that's provided, because we talk around it a lot. And I think if we were to come back and have a conversation about housing, and we talk about each one of these elements over the next 2 months, you pretty much have a plan, you know. And I think, you know, the only thing that would be out would be, you know, how we partner with somebody for Sabatini, for example, because that's the one that's missing. We had 602 Galena, great, whatever. We've got dirt right in the middle of town. We just need a partner to develop it. So again, I think it's difficult to have some of these conversations right now just because of the bandwidth that's already occupied in your world. Only so many things can pass over your desk in a day. And we really need to get help. And by the way, sorry to learn that we lost Ron. Whatever reason, did my inspection, he was great. And I know it's going to be tough for Rick. But again, it just speaks to the problem. But in terms of the plan, I agree. We just need to use what we have, because I think clearly if we apply what we have to the needs that have been identified, to all the plans and study, we get it. We know we need. So I would just like council to have a work session with you that says, start buying this stuff, or go see these guys. We need, you know, and we're hobbled, of course, again, because that missing piece, that housing director, we'd love to have that to help implement all that. But in terms of the planning, you know, I probably won't be around when the final decision is made, but yeah, $100,000 just to talk about where we need to focus the money. I don't get it, you know. And I love the way the Complete Streets Master Plan is really now that omnibus package that really is informed by all these tangential operating strategies, which is mobility and pathways, and it all came together in that Complete Streets Plan, which I love. So it's a great way to look at, great prism to look at all of that. So I look forward to that becoming almost the operational platform, that operational piece. And everything has to kind of come into that, because how does it affect this? Because this is the area where it's important. Yeah, plan, housing plan. I think that council's got it. I think you need to get better direction from us.
Based on what I'm hearing from this conversation, I think it would be helpful for us to follow up with our plan to come back to you in March and to kind of present to you this financial plan that we're looking at. And additionally, before that, on February 10th, we are meeting with Dee Weiser and some potential people to provide some financing, so we can also provide additional information about the possibility of financing some of these projects as well. So hopefully that would be a helpful place to follow up on this.
I would quickly just note my parts and we'll keep moving. First in Maine, I know you brought it up and I know it's a passion of mine from day one, but I think right now we have enough on our plate, and I think going there isn't worth, as Dan referenced, we've got enough going on, and I don't think we have enough consensus on what that should be, that I think let's follow through with some of the plans we have and ideas we have, and we can let that one sit. I don't think it's wasted. It's a little bit wasted space, but the time I don't think should be invested in that. Andy Held did text me today just saying he'd love, he thinks, and it's been referenced a few times here, but he called it out a little more specifically of the 50%, excuse me, let me read this. Perhaps we change our goal of 50% full-time occupancy to more of a sustainable living community. So I think kind of what you were saying, and that might be something that we can tie into Dan's work session pending your meeting of like, what does that look like and how do those two tie together a little more cleanly? So I'm good with that. And then I'll make sure Rick gets a chance and then we'll keep moving. Rick?
Hey, Hunter, I'm good with what you guys have. I just have one more at the end of the strategic plan discussion. I have a,
So,
yep.
all right.
Before we move on, can I just add one thing? On that 50%, I actually really do like the metric. It's something measurable that I don't think we've had it in place long enough to really appreciate it. I would prefer something measurable as opposed to something immeasurable that future councils can't really gauge, right? Community feel, mountain town character, stuff like that, I think is good visionary stuff. But when we're writing policies to move the needle, you need to know where you're coming from and where you're going. So I'd obviously love to discuss it further, but I think there's real value in having a metric as part of it, as part of the policy or this strategic plan.
I'm sorry, just to jump on that because it makes sense to me, but I really think that focus needs to be on break that full-time occupancy down to what we're really struggling here locally, which is workforce capacity. And you've got to find a way to link workforce capacity as a function of full-time occupancy, but also versus that short-term rental capacity and lodging capacity. So I think the idea is to identify what that balance is quantitatively and keep that in mind. And even allowing short-term workforce capacity to count for that, because that's really, really important. So it's not just full-time residents. We're struggling right now with workforce capacity. So you need to find a way to introduce that into the evaluative process so that that number is always there. And I think of this in terms of, if you ever have that conversation about caps, that cap moves as a function of workforce capacity against short-term capacity, because that's the balance that seems to be in crisis right now. So as full-time occupancy is evolving with different types of demographics, we've got to keep our eye on that workforce capacity that's really relevant to our working economy right now, which is really where we're struggling. So figuring out a way to create that index, I think, and having that up front in that conversation and that metric is really important.
What I would suggest two things perhaps. One is I just want to hear there is consensus that take First and Main off of our project plan for 2022. We got enough.
Yeah.
I think you'll get a big hooray for that one. Yeah, great. All right. And then I would say with the metrics, because what you were really talking about with the metrics is taking it from about 3,000 residents to 4,500. And what kind of residents are those? Are those gig economy people? Are those people who are workforce? No, I mean, that's what I mean. Like, it would be good for us to understand that. And perhaps that is a good metric to really drill down on and have us understand council's vision during your retreat in May, June, because the projects we're doing, it sounds like they're meeting your goals, at least some of them. Yes?
Yeah, I think what Dan said, we need to figure out what having a metric that's measurable, but what it actually is achieving that we want as a council. And that's what we just need to have that conversation along with what I think you'll figure out with some of the kind of the long-term funding plan and how they tie together.
Councilmember Aronson, says a lot to me. Like, if we don't understand that, as a group, then have that common understanding. And I think that would be a really helpful thing for council to tell us what we're looking for out of that metric. 4,500 people, and who are they and what are they doing? And are they retired? Are they gig economy? And that would be a good thing maybe to go down that road with a retreat.
That was a huge lot I just want to make sure what you've just said is we need to talk more about this.
Mm-hmm.
We're not putting a metric at 4,500 people. We're not putting a metric at anything. We're just saying complicated issue down the road. We're going to have this more detailed conversation, but nothing's being decided tonight.
Reminds me of the Ranger Rook, where they never know what the end line, the finish line is. That's hard to do that as a group. So
You're spot on.
spot on. Yeah. Thanks for saying what the communications person couldn't say. There we go. Inclusive community. Let's move to thriving economy.
All right, this is me again. So development of Main Street economy. So this, again, going back, this was in the 2021 strategic plan. And when this was adopted in, I think, late fall of 2020, there was a lot of questions. There was a lot of unknowns. If you recall, we were shutting down we were still at occupancy limitations in businesses, or indoor occupancy at 25% or less, depending on the type of business. So there was a lot of unknowns. And this was put in there, I think, on some level to have an idea of how is the economy going to react coming out of the pandemic. And we're still not fully out of the pandemic, but I think we'd all agree that it performed a lot better than anybody anticipated, whether it's our town finances or the businesses on Main Street and out on Summit Boulevard. So that's a positive, certainly. As a result, we have a number of things in here, such as develop that Main Street economy. What does that actually mean? So another item under there was consider the promenade. Town council considered the promenade back in November or late October, actually. And I think there has been a decision made on that. So that's no longer there. Obviously, it could come up again. It came up again earlier tonight in a complete streets discussion, which was not at all related to the promenade, but yet it is. So some of these things will continue to come up. There was speaking of plan fatigue, there was a bullet point in the 2021 strategic plan for a Main Street master plan for the mountains to the marina. That was not budgeted for in 2022. And I think there was one of the reasons behind that is, again, how are we going to come out of the economy or out of the pandemic? What is Main Street going to look like? Is there going to be a promenade? There was a lot of these big, really, really big questions that would have to be discussed before we ever went to a Main Street master plan. Looking back at community plans and some other things, do we need to take another look at a potential scope for the Main Street master plan and what the purpose of that is? I think maybe my answer would probably be yes on that before we pursued that very much further. So again, these were things that were in the strategic plan. They're not necessarily budgeted, but we did want to give you an update on the status of some of those. Next one
It's going to be Jeff.
is Jeff. Great.
And I'll just pop them up here. Okay.
So there is some things that did get done. Things moving forward still, but there are some things to get done. So the CDOT gap project design, that's the whole project and how it relates to the trails and the master plan. Well, CDOT got that finished. We have our underpass from the county commons to the PRA, which was done in 2020. And then we've got connecting sidewalks and connecting paths all along the side of Highway 9 now. And not to mention, we have a much safer crossing at Highway 9 and Main Street now, with an additional crosswalk that has never been there, crossing Main Street north to south. So we've got a little bit more pedestrian mobility there. And then with the removal of Triangle Park, or not the park, but the big sweeping right, well, now we've got a sidewalk that runs right there instead of people getting lost and walking into that concrete no man's land that we had there. So that's all been cleaned up and taken care of. And from what I've seen, it's working pretty well. I'll be real curious to see how that crosswalk and all of that traffic interaction works this summer, because we haven't seen it during a summer season yet. So it'll be nice to see that. Improving fiber infrastructure. We did use the dig once policy that we took care of. I think it was 2020, maybe 2019. The last 3 years are a blur, 4 years are a blur. But we did use that policy to lay approximately 8,000 feet of fiber conduit all throughout town. The main project being the trunk line that goes from the Summit Daily building all the way down to 7th and Main. And that was done as part of the AT&T 5G upgrade that they're doing on Main Street. But we put 2 of our own conduits in there with it, thanks to that dig once policy. And I guess I'll keep going if you want to. Because this gets us into 2022 and what we're doing. So the gap project completion, it is complete. Now it's the town's turn to make it look nice. So we are currently in design with Norris Designs to do the landscaping and hardscaping design of not only the medians, but the roundabouts as well. You're going to see a preliminary plan for the whole thing on March 22nd. We're bringing that to you so you can see the direction we're going. Our goal is to get a complete set of construction drawings this summer and then do the construction of the roundabouts because those are the most visible thing that need something to be done with them, and do that in the fall this year based on the input that we get from you in March. And we're basing all of this on the input that we got from you earlier in the fall about the mountain motif that you wanted and low maintenance, low water use. That's the direction we're headed. We're looking at solar powered streetlights. So we're looking at all of these things to try to make this the most efficient and maintenance free project that we can. So that's the plan. That's the schedule for, we're going to do roundabouts this year. And then next year, we're going to do the median work, because I think that the community has probably had enough of construction on Highway 9, tearing it up for the whole summer. So that's why we're kind of pushing it into the fall. Next is improved fiber infrastructure. I know that Vanessa will speak to this first bullet point, but we are working on getting an RFP out to get a fiber system designed. I mean, we can put all the conduit in the ground we want, but then what do we do with it? So that process is going to move forward, and I don't know what those dates are quite yet. So
We'll put out an RFP in March. And this is really just a like infrastructure planning. This is pretty clear stuff about how you make this happen. I've had some really phenomenal connections that have been made for me by Shannon Haynes with other municipalities who have fiber utilities themselves, and what that really looks like and how realistic that really is. And they provided me just last week with some great contacts with CenturyLink, who sound interested in doing a public-private partnership, which sure sounds appealing when you listen to Shannon and others talk about what it's like to run a utility like that. And you're like, oh, okay, let's talk to CenturyLink. That sounds delightful. And they're wanting to do more of that. So it's exciting, but yes, it is a plan. I don't know that it would cause you much plan fatigue. Maybe just solve your insomnia, because it's about where we're actually going to lay fiber and how we're going to make that happen across the middle mile, the last mile. And yes, there is federal funding to be had. We will be asking and reaching out. I will be reaching out to somebody at DOLA who's a contact to ask, hey, this is what we're looking to do with this planning project. Would you be receptive to a grant for even just the planning portion of this, even though it's budgeted for, and well, it is budgeted for, and we need to, I think it's 25% match. So it's good stuff.
and then one last comment there, the continue to install conduit. There are no projects right now on the board, but I'm sure as things happen with Sage Telecommunications, they're pretty much the folks that are driving everything. If there's an opportunity for the town to get conduit, a sizable length of conduit, we will be doing it. We have conduit on hand. We're ready to go. We just got to identify that project that's suitable for it.
And we're also looking to do a bit of collaboration with the county, the towns of Dillon, Silverthorne, and Breckenridge. They have a grant writer at the county who's actually willing to do a county-wide grant application for infrastructure. So actually paying to put that conduit in. We of course need to provide a match. We're much more powerful together on this particular project and applying as a county of 30,000 people rather than a town of 3,000 people. So we're working on that side of the funding and putting in more conduit as well. That funding probably won't, that grant probably won't come out until May or June. They're still writing the rules for it right now. Don, the next one is you.
Parklet future plans. So I'm not going to belabor this too much because we did have a fairly good discussion about that back in October, where council did direct staff to come back with a fee structure as well as some criteria and some process on how we might administer use of parklets and use of the town right of way. So it's not just parklets, it's streets, it's sidewalks, it's any town public right of way. So we are working on that. We anticipate bringing that to council in April, so that way it'll be in place for the summer season.
Another note on that real quick is we have been speaking with the folks at the marina, and there has been some thought to use, because we have a lot of little parklets. Some thought to use some of those out on the beach. In the sand out there, as little decks out there. We're also looking at now knowing the landscaping that we're doing out there, and that we may not have this grass that we want out there. Maybe kind of clean up that dirt area, put some parklets out there with some crusher fine trails that can, cheap to build, easy to build, and they won't be in the way of future. So we are looking at ways to, if the businesses don't want them on Main Street, or council decides, no, we don't want to do this anymore, they're not just going to get put in the spontaneous combustion bonfire and, we will be using them anywhere that we can. And so along with the flower barrels as well, those will be out on Main Street and at the marina, because we've got a lot of those as well. So that all of that stuff will be reused. So I just want to make sure that that was clear, that there are options for those parklets.
So thriving economy, perhaps a few of the things that would be good to hear about. Sounds like Main Street master plan, so that Marina to the Mountains plan that we did not budget for in 2022. Is that something we should be pursuing for 2023, looking at?
I personally feel like we almost have it, in my opinion, between both work session items. I feel like we kind of talked about I-70 to the lakefront tonight that kind of draws those two together. And I feel like let's get those in the works. And I don't think we need to invest more mental or money power into making that happen. That'd be my take.
My only thought is the gap is West Main, as always. Like, what the heck do we do with that space?
But there's how many units are about to be built there, so.
Keep in mind, council, that's 175-foot right of way. That is a huge right of way. Starting right here at Madison, all the way to I-70, that's 175-foot right of way.
So hearing that, I think there is some concepts, certainly West Main is, if there's any additional work that needs to be done from the planning or thought side, it really should focus on West Main. And I think that's kind of where staff is leaning as well, so.
How much town influence we have on development?
I mean, there is,
West Main parking lot is.
yeah, there is some, and I think the concept there is really how do we tie, and this was discussed in the community plan as well, is right now we want to make sure that and try to extend and connect Main Street from, well, about Second Avenue all the way there. And there's some residential development that's already there. There are some vacant parcels. There's a development application that has been submitted to plan to the town that went to planning commission at sketch plan for a mixed use building at that large vacant parcel on the south side. So there's also talk about some redevelopment at some existing properties on West Main. So there are opportunities there. I think certainly there's opportunities for parking. Jeff noted the very wide right of way. There's also a number of utility easements in there that make it so that that entire West Main corridor has a completely different feel than East Main. That said, there are things that we could do to make it function a little bit better and feel a little bit better.
Tick off a little easier one here, which is, so I think West Main will throw somewhere into some of those working plans and come back with that project plan for 2023 or 2024. Start laying out that calendar. Then developing a townwide economic diversification, development and growth strategy. Whoa, mouthful. Is that something, now that we are through this pandemic, is that something that we want to keep pursuing for the future?
What is it?
Development. It was an economic development plan, basically.
One of our, yeah. I mean, to me, I think, kind of go back to what Dan said, I think economic development right now falls solely in the lap of getting workers and workforce housing, because we're going to lose our economy if we don't have, I mean, I don't know if you've all fielded the complaints, but Loaf and Jug isn't open until 9 in the morning. So no one can get gas on this side of town to commute to the jobs because they don't have staff. I think that's our economic development plan, is getting workforce housing and getting people back in business. personally.
If there were confetti cannon, it would be going off. Okay.
Does council agree
Promenade,
with that?
promenade concept, I'm hearing it come up here and there, maybe something to save for a retreat. Discussion to come back to council at some point.
Yeah, I think later, but we've made the plan for this summer, so I think we'll wait until see how the summer goes and then revisit that.
But keep it on there somewhere.
Keep it on there. Yeah, keep it on there for a revisit.
Okay. Anything else on thriving economy?
Things.
Yes.
Building plan review improvements. We know that's still an issue and it should stay on the hot button, that we need to be better at that. And we're spending a whole lot of money on a federal lobbyist. And I've heard DOLA mentioned twice, but I haven't heard how we're going to be securing the federal money. Do we have a plan in place with grant writers and just
Much of
finding the
that,
money? We
much
got
of that
somebody
is-
ready to go argue for us. Are we ready to?
much of
go
that
chase
is
it?
federal money. So it ends up going to the state as well. The grant for fiber infrastructure through the county is federal money that's gone to the state, and some of it is federal money potentially as well. In terms of shovel-ready stuff, PFAS is one of those things we're looking at hiring a grant writer for. It's a very specialized topic. The lobbyist feels like we have a lot of opportunity to get funding for that. As mentioned with housing, stuff that's shovel ready, and certainly granite is very close to that. That's a possibility. And certainly one that we keep talking to the lobbyist about. We just had a meeting with a lobbyist where we talked through the 6 priorities that we have and talked about what was the stuff that we are most likely going to be able to get grants for. And it was broadband, housing, and PFAS at this point.
I want to make sure that we are doing everything we need to do to maximize our space in Washington. I don't know exactly what it means. I just want to make sure when we get to the end of the day, if we don't get the money, that the lobbyist will look at us and say, we did everything we needed to do. And we could look at ourselves and say, we did everything we needed to do. You can't win them all. But this is something I know it needs a little focus. And that's why I just would love to see it on a list of somewhere or another, maximizing the utilization of our lobbyists through grant writing. That's all. Whatever the projects are, I'm sort of channeling Andy Held because he's the one who always says he's leaning on our lobbyists, but I think that we've got gaps to fill in that process. So I just want to make sure those gaps are getting filled.
I just wanted to also add that similar to the fiber infrastructure money that Vanessa described, that the ARPA money from housing will also be funneled through the state and through DOLA. So, yeah, just wanted to.
I don't claim to understand it. I just, if we get a 0, I want to make sure that it's not because of our missing the mark or missing the boat.
And I think I agree. We should keep that on somehow, probably in this list of that. And a good talk we had with Mara the other day was just that, of getting a more action plan oriented updates from her for what we as a staff and the council can do to address exactly what you're saying. So we're tweaking that presentation a little bit from her, not presentation, but the reports we get. And a lot of it might be what Vanessa already said, is going out to hire a grant writer since we don't have one in-house, making sure we're getting grant writers who specifically know what we're asking to write the grants for, and Mara then helps direct that.
She does. They help actually identify the grants that are appropriate. And then the things they can do, which has been very telling, is they can certainly get our electeds, federal and state, to write letters of support, which are very powerful. And then they can also keep identifying, they cannot lobby the executive branch, the people who are making the decisions about these grants. It's actually not allowed, but electeds can. So there's been a conversation about electeds and getting them in touch with the state and also with the federal. And I mean, federal is not hosting meetings at this point yet. They're not. So you can't visit them yet. But what does that look like when we get down that road? Certainly, and just really improving that process with Mara and continuing to talk through that and talk through opportunities. So we hear you loud and clear. And we would certainly love to get big old grants. Good, great. I'll just sit down, Don.
All right, environment. So. All right, so environment, and you'll be pleased to hear that I'm not going to say the word plan or suggest that we do another plan. What we are going to be doing, and one of the goals from the 2021 strategic plan was to implement the climate action plan. And I think that's the key focus. And one of those also is related to town council's goal that was set in 2019, I believe, for going towards net zero and getting to net zero by 2035. So with that, what we are working on is a number of these bullet points, which are really super small on my screen, but we're looking at a number of things, and we're creating baselines so that we can actually get some energy efficiency upgrades to town hall, identify what would be the best project to accomplish that. We have, as you know, we've installed a number of EV chargers around town. There's one at Third, and there's there's a set of 2 at Third, there's a set of 2 at the Marina, and there's a set of 2 at the PRA. And we're looking at additional EV chargers for the summer of 2022. So there's a number of things that we are working on in the guise of implementing the climate and, implementing environmental stewardship goals, which also fall under our overall environmental strategic plan. Wildfire mitigation work has been identified as a big project that was originally set to occur in the summer of 2021 due to some scheduling issues with the contractor, Rocky Mountain Youth Corps, that fell through. So we are looking and have that on the schedule for the summer of 2022. We have made a strong effort to include stormwater best management practices in all town projects. Certainly Addison and Jeff at Public Works have done so, and our environmental coordinator has been involved in that as well to make sure that is occurring. Additionally, we've adopted a lot of that into our unified development code. So it's not just for town projects, it's also for other projects that is going to have some improved stormwater management. Wildproof dumpster, we've been talking about that for a long time at Town Hall. We are in design, working with Alan Garrett Architects on that, and we intend to have that constructed by the end of 2022, hopefully before fall of 2022. The next one is enforcement of trash regulations. While we had CSOs, I think we were making some progress on that. We are currently without CSOs at the moment, and certainly once we do have some community service officers, we'll be able to work a little bit better on that. Waste diversion at businesses. So we pay as you throw. This is coming to council as a potential ordinance in March for pay as you throw, as well as universal recycling. So more to come on that one in March, as Thad's rapidly writing the ordinance. And then certainly promoting reusable bottles and decreasing the use of plastic. That's always a goal. We will continue to work and do what we can to promote that moving forward. Finally, implementing climate action plan. So here is where we work with a lot of our community partners, HC3 being key among them, as well as the other jurisdictions in the county. And so we do have climate action in the budget. We supplement and support HC3 in a lot of the work that they do on a wider basis. Moving forward, and here, speaking of things that we actually did do and accomplish, eliminating plastic single-use bags. That was accomplished January of 2021. Town Council passed an ordinance. It was implemented and made effective on September 1st of 2021. We've been generating fees and using those fees to support some of our other programs, as well as community outreach and education. 2022, what's in the budget? Lots of stuff. Continued participation in the climate action plan. Again, Solarized Summit rebate program. That's been going on for 3 years now. Each year in Frisco, there's been $15,000 in budget, which is a $1,500 rebate for people to implement and do improvement solar onto their home. So every year there's been 10 new solar systems that have been funded. For 2022, we have the same amount in the budget for 10 systems, and we've already had our first application. So this is continues to be a program that's strongly supported by the community and is proving to have some positive impacts. Again, we mentioned the pay-as-you-throw universal recycling ordinance will be going on here, and this is part of what HC3 does for us. They help coordinate that process again, so that there's a consistency and regulation across jurisdictions. So we're not trying to coordinate with Breckenridge, who's trying to coordinate with Summit County. Sometimes a third party really does that and is much more effective with things like that. We are also continuing to work on identifying additional sustainability projects that we can use in order to support those overall goals. One item, and this is not really in the climate action plan, but it is something that we are working on and have budgeted for, and that's participation in the Mountain Towns 2030 conference, which is going to be occurring this fall in Breckenridge. The town is participating in funding to support this conference, essentially as a sponsor, as well as participating in the coordination and steering committee that's putting this conference on. And then finally, going to turn it over to Leslie, who's going to talk about paperless transactions. Very excited.
I actually am really excited to implement some paperless. I do believe in the success of it. I've seen it work where you can get rates as high as, over 90% in paperless water billing, and as well as paperless electronic sales tax remittance as well. So those are things that we plan to bring to you in May. As far as implementing a fee to charge for people that choose to not be paperless in those two areas, as well as some things that we'll do behind the scenes as far as making sure that we're sending out renewals for business license in the paperless format, that we're processing credit card receipt approvals electronically. So you won't see all those other things, but you will see some information from us regarding the water billing and the paper filing fee.
A long list. Water projects. Well, I'll just go through these real quick. The first one, OCCT chemical pump redundancy is complete. Pumps are on the shelf, and what that is spare pumps for the pH adjustment chemical, so that we can always adjust the pH as we're required by the state health department. Townwide leak survey will be done in May. It was done last year as well. We identified 2 leaks. Both of those leaks have been fixed. Treatment plant instrument updates will be done in June. This is all of the different process instruments that are now no longer supported. They've been up there at the plant for almost 15 years. And it's time for some new ones that are supported. Water Smart implementation and support. This is ongoing right now. We are working with contract negotiations with Water Smart to, and then what this is that program that once we get all the meters changed out, that people can get online and look at their real-time water usage and watch what's happening. And then we can get alerts if there's a leak and in a second home and we don't know it and they don't know it. So that's hopefully will be ongoing and up and running by the end of summer. Aspen Drive water main replacement. This is the water main that freezes every single year without fail. I hope to have that completed by August or September. That's the only water main that does that. Started the tap efficiency program. This has been an ongoing program over the last few years. I think it started in 2019. I think last count we were at over 100 participants in one way or another of this efficiency plan. And it's actually working because I think anyway, it's doing its part, because we, in our water efficiency plan that we signed up for 2018, 2019, we are reaching our goals of water reduction even, well, we've had a population reduction now too. So, but we're reaching our goals in that plan, which is good. Each year we have met our goal of water reduction in that plan. So that's looking really good. Meter reading technology, that goes with the Water Smart. We are replacing the older meters as fast as we can. And I'd say we're about 95% complete on getting rid of the old meters. What we're working on now is the large old meters, the 2-inch and larger that are in some of these condos that have been in there since the condos were built 30, 40 years ago. So we're working on trying to get those meters replaced. Slow the flow program. This is the outdoor irrigation program that is ongoing. We had 6, I think, participants last year. And then this year, the town is going to take a lot of those slots and look at our irrigation systems and make sure that they're all as efficient as they can be. Yeah, that's going to be the irrigation audit on town land. PFAS treatment planning, it's actually in design right now. Our goal is to have that fully designed by the end of this summer, and hopefully with maybe some grant money or some other money that we have, put that treatment in this fall. That's our goal. It may get pushed into next winter. And then this last one, excuse me, out of jurisdiction water requests. You may remember, well, I'm sure you remember all the requests of out of town water, folks, one-offs here and there trying to get water. This was a real big push by the previous 2 town managers, and I just want to make sure that you still want staff to spend the time to come up with policies to do this. We can. I started working on it a little bit with Thad and Jennifer Delala, but then kind of got sidestepped with some other things that I was asked to do. So I kind of need some clarification from you. Do you want us to continue to go down that path? My initial goal was to have something ready for you this summer, but I don't think that we're going to be able to do that. But this was something that I didn't necessarily, when it was discussed the first time, didn't really get a sense that everybody on council was for this. So I wanted to bring it back and get clarification, if you will. And then on infrastructure here, stormwater repairs, those happen every year now that we've done our study and we know what we need to work on. More of that work will be done in September of this year. And then, of course, Don already spoke to the town hall dumpster enclosure. And that's it for sustainable environment.
A clarification on the jurisdiction process as well. The process goes like this. Somebody approaches typically Jeff Goebel, and then they are directed to bring their case to council. That does feel like it feels like a somewhat inelegant process and a difficult one. So part of that would be just to determine how that process would look and how these requests would be considered. And that's the thing that we're looking for direction, rather than, yep, we're up for giving everybody water.
Anybody water, right? So how much process do we need to say no?
Do you want to say no? Do you want them to come to council and make their case?
I'm only half joking, because especially with the Lake Hill conversation ongoing, I don't think it's a good time to be developing a process to be extending water outside of there. There may be a time for it, but not in the middle of Lake Hill negotiations for what limited water we have.
The only mention of this process in code is town council has the sole discretion to approve or deny water service to there. That's the only discussion, that's the only words in there about that. So yes, it is very simplistic, very easy, but it can also make it very difficult, especially for the folks that are asking. So, but you know, that's why I kind of wanted some clarification.
So I don't think it's changed. It's people can prove their case, and council, depending on personal conditions at the time, can make the based on that. But I see a reason to change it. It's irregular.
You guys have plenty of other things to do.
You can say something, Jessica?
Well, I'm trying to recall the conversation, because I think it was trying to standardize how we do make those decisions, and in anticipation, not even with Lake Hill on the line, but in anticipation of more and more of the Bill's Ranch in particular coming to us to ask. So there was a reason behind it, but I don't recall any suggestion as to what that policy should be, and
Well-
recognizing, Melissa, do you remember?
I do, because we've had, and I know Jeff, you probably remember it like it was yesterday, but over the last few years, we've had these requests, and we go through the process and sort of think about it subjectively. And the thought, excuse me, the thought process with the last one that came in that was over in Frisco Heights was, gosh, it would make a whole lot of sense to connect to town water, but without some criteria that we can revisit as these come in, we're just sort of doing this subjectively and ad hoc. So in my mind, I wasn't thinking that it would be terribly involved. I certainly don't think it's a top priority, Jeff, but I definitely don't want to drop it because there was a reason that we, as we have new developments come in, I can't help but recognize that we have homes within our Frisco community that at some point they may need that water. And so we need to address because of their well situation. So we do need to take those into account prior to bringing on future developments. So I think this is important. It's not top priority, but we need to systematize how we evaluate each application that comes in, because there's only going to be more and more. And with climate change, people's well situations, I think we should prepare for that.
Got it. Yes. At some point. Okay. The other thing that came up and was on one of these project plans as well, and it's not on this list because it was a while ago, and I would love to hear again, and I'm sure Jeff would as well, is in terms of putting solar on Public Works. Is that something that we should still be budgeting for going forward? Not budgeted for this year.
For me, I think so. We designed that new building with the roof and fixed the roof to do it. I think, yeah, I'd like to keep that in the budget, keep moving forward.
Soleil was working on that. At one time, and I know she's having discussions with somebody, but I don't know where.
I'd like to keep it moving forward in the budget. Next year's budget. Yeah, next year's, yep.
For 2023.
DOLA has a renewable energy grant that I know I suggested for the Peninsula
Slope side.
but this could potentially also be a project. Maybe you could write for both of them. I don't know.
We'll look at that for this year then, and budget otherwise for 2023. Anything else on sustainable environment? You're all holding up really well without dinner. Nicely done.
Rick, did you want to?
Just to chime in at the very end here, I think just because there were direct asks, yes, solar and Public Works, and I do think we do need to systematize the decision on how to make a decision as to whether we allow water to be used out of district. In that, it gives us something to go back to say no on, and this is why, as opposed to the ad hoc. And I don't think it's complicated.
Great. All right. Vibrant culture, recreation, fun stuff. Not that it all hasn't been incredibly fun.
Right, we'll jump right into this, and there's a lot of collaboration under Vibrant Culture, Arts and Recreation. So my colleagues here will jump in as well. So to start things off, implement the Frisco Bay Marina improvements. So implemented phase 2 of the Marina Master Plan. As you guys know, this does include the new building, which we're hoping to be in here to kick off the 2022 summer season by June. And then the lift station and the fuel system as well. We're wrapped up into that plan. Complete parking circulation study. We're going to have an RFP out hopefully relatively soon for that, with the goal of implementing paid parking this summer. Prioritizing future projects and funding, and then implementing operational improvements. So we did an operational audit in 2020 with F3 Marina. We made updates to the audit in 2021 alongside with F3 Marina. And then we presented this plan to you. And one of the things that was included in that was the recommendations for the rate changes at the marina, which were implemented. And then just so you guys all know, I'm pretty sure you're in the loop, but our contract with F3 Marina is up and we are not moving forward, continuing that agreement with them. And next up here, implement Peninsula Recreation Area, or as we like to call it, the PRA improvements. Adopt comprehensive vision and project implementation plan, which you guys did right as COVID hit. I think we had one last community meeting before everything got shut down. So that was back in March or April-ish of 2020. And then complete design of the new Slopeside Hall. As you know, we are continuing to work on the design and aim to have the design in front of the Planning Commission to review this spring, with the ultimate goal of construction starting this summer of 2022. And implement PRA Master Development Plan. So let me see. So we, gosh, where am I at right here? So I'm like losing my train of thought. Master Development Plan for trails. So as you guys know, we have already started to implement. Pete and his team out there have done many things with the soft surface trails out there, summer and winter use, which has been great. New additions. If you guys haven't been out there, be sure to check that out. And then to back up just the wedding venue, we did in-house, our team constructed pretty much like a wedding platform. If you haven't seen that as well, the views are great of basically peaks 1 and 2. I mean, if you look one direction, you'll see Buffalo, but it's out there kind of in the summer area for the 2 Below Zero operation. So our team did construct that, and we hosted our first wedding there, which was also one of our colleagues who now works at the Visitor Information Center. So she was actually the first wedding up there. So we continue to move forward booking weddings. Just on a side note, pretty much the Day Lodge is completely booked the entire summer with the events that we're hosting there, and then weddings as well. So we're hoping to continue to promote this new wedding platform as well in the future. Develop Frisco Historic Park Museum long range plan. So Rose, we did submit a capital request in October of 2021 for the 2022 budget for funds to develop a long range plan. This plan was not considered for funding at that time. However, we did work on submitting some grants or just getting some processes moving along that maybe weren't coming out of our budget. And we did receive some money to do a collection assessment. So Rose, we had a visitor here at the museum about a month ago to do a collection assessment that addressed kind of the long-term care of the museum artifacts and the collection that we have there. So that's kind of the direction we're in right now. And then one thing, it's on a bullet point on this, but we just don't want to forget that we also want to work on a plan for the Excelsior House and Mansfield Cabin. We do still have those up in the Boneyard area. So just want to put a little plug in that we have not forgotten about those 2 buildings, one which is intact and the other one which is in pieces. So we have that on our radar as well. And then implementing the Parks Master Plan. I believe maybe Don or Jeff, did you guys have anything to add with that moving forward with some Walter Byron?
Walter Byron Phase 2, if you will, is going to be constructed this summer, and that's the overlook on the pond and a crusher fine path in there. And then we're also going to be doing some repairs on the area around the bathroom. We're having those concrete heaves happening again, so we're going to look at doing those repairs in-house this summer. And then we are also out to bid right now for the lighting at Meadow Creek Park. And that bid, just so council knows, the original bid is asking for solar. And then there's a bid alternate for electric wired lighting. So we're getting both to try to figure out what the best way to go is out there.
Increase and encourage art in public spaces, continued work with the Make Frisco Arts Group, and also of course commissioned mural in 2021 at corner of, or intersection of Third and Main. Really successful. Winter's done its job on that mural, unfortunately. And then this is you.
All right, and then the 2022 project priorities. Here we have implement the Frisco Bay Marina improvements. So as you guys know, that includes evaluating and having design work. We're continuing design work right now for the Marina Island Grill, the Lund House, and the bathhouse design, with the goal of having construction start on those in 2023. Marina site and landscape. We just had a presentation earlier from Susan, Matt, and Megan on what that looks like. And then marina boat ramp repairs. Jeff, you have another update on that for us?
Just same thing I said
Okay.
earlier, it's in design and we'll get it done this fall.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry. Next up, implement Peninsula Recreation Area improvements. Again, already mentioned Slopeside Hall construction, hoping to have that building construction starting here in 2022. Implement PRA Master Development Plan for trails within the PRA. So in addition to continuing building trails and improving connectivity out at the Peninsula Rec area, this summer, we're really excited to pilot a summer trailhead maintenance / ranger program, where we are going to hopefully bring on board a couple new staff members, seasonal staff members, that will service and maintain recycling and trash at the 6 trailheads here in Frisco, as well as serve as basically a trail ambassador for the community and educate guests on Leave No Trace, help with wayfinding, answer any questions those guests have. So we're really excited to pilot that program this summer. Continue to implement the Parks Master Plan. So we've already kind of touched on that. Anything else to add to that, Don or Jeff, the Parks Master Plan? Okay. Backyard trails, or sorry, Meadow Creek. I skipped one. Yeah, Meadow Creek.
Fine. Yep, you did great.
Any
That's an
updates?
ongoing process.
Jeff, I don't think they can hear you.
Hear me. So we purchased the equipment and some of the equipment to make that better out there. I don't know if you've been there, but we enclosed the gazebo a little bit. We put rubber matting down. We've got a storage shed out there now. We purchased a very large snow blower to make the job quicker. We purchased a walk behind broom to clean it up, and we built in-house a Zamboni machine, and we have used that a couple of times. We did lose control of the ice through this 4-foot snowfall that we had Christmas, New Year's, but now it's back. We've gotten it back out there. Kind of sunk a little bit of pieces of equipment on the side, but no problem. We pulled them out. Nobody got hurt. Nobody got scared. Well, maybe not scared, but and so we continue to go out there every day as our time allows, especially on days like this when we're not dealing with snowfall and snow plowing. We're out there clearing it off, Zamboning it, and it's a much bigger than it was before. We have the boards but we just haven't been able to get them out yet because I don't know that the quality of ice is going to stay good right now. So with our lack of staffing that we have, unfortunately, we did hire somebody specifically for that. But because we're down 3 people, that person is helping with snow removal throughout town as well. So balancing priorities, but I think we're doing a pretty good job on it. And I think we did a pretty good job bringing it back.
Jeff, yeah, thanks. I would say one of the thoughts that I had when I was out there last week was we actually had made strides with affordable housing because somebody moved into the gazebo. And they
Kick them out every day.
They were quite very nice gentlemen.
Well, they were nice to you.
Oh,
Oh, cool, good.
That was something to shout out to as a success. But, the ice, you guys did make a great recovery from that. You've been out there a couple times and we're staying off. And one of the suggestions I have from somebody that was out there was if we proceed down this path next year, is a handrail to help people walk down from the gazebo down to the ice. If there's a way we can get something set up, it can get a little bit for people who aren't too proficient on the blades. You can get a little stability. That's a thought. You know, overall, it's great to see it back in action. It was quite a comeback. cracks are back, that's an ongoing thing, but without full-time maintenance, you're not gonna get after that. But it is skating well, and I've been out there and seen, people enjoying it quite a bit. So thanks for your team to get it back in shape.
Thank you.
Dawn, this is you.
Frisco Backyard. So as you may recall, back in December, we put out a RFP for some to develop and to go through the planning process that's required to do work on Forest Service property and go through the NEPA permitting on that. And the purpose of that is to do fire mitigation and trails planning in the Frisco Backyard area. So that is, we have received 4 proposals for under that, and we are reviewing those with Forest Service input to make sure that the firm that we hire will be able to implement that in accordance with all Forest Service requirements for that NEPA process. We anticipate that we'll be bringing a contract forward to council in March or early April. And then that planning process we anticipate will take 12 to 18 months. So it's moving forward. It's going to be a multiple year project just to get it approved by the Forest Service. And then we can actually start the work of doing some fire mitigation in the backyard, maybe in late 2023, early 2024.
Again, art in public spaces, very recent discussion, strategic plan. RFP went out last Friday, February 4th, as was outlined in the presentation to council. Virtual meeting on Friday, so we'll see what kind of interest we have in the plan, and then proposals are due in March. And then Arts Council, of course, to kind of a parallel approach where planning is happening and an Arts Council will be figured out by consultants and community input, and all that good stuff. Okay, culture, arts, recreation. Anything you see here we should not be doing? Anything we missed?
Day Lodge. We budgeted for him, just wondering how it's going.
We will get back to you. Okay.
Complicated as ice, but it's my little bugaboo.
Anything else on track? Good.
Still holding up well. Yep. Well done, everybody. Everybody. You just have 5 goals.
Oh,
they're big. This is the last one. Yes.
Barbecue challenge. We haven't heard anything about it since we talked about revisiting it. So I would love an update.
Okay.
Not now.
Sure.
But I don't want to just have it be July and now all of a sudden we got a barbecue challenge that we've asked to be revised and rethought. It would be nice to see where you guys are.
Yep, it's in
sometime
June.
soon.
So we'll do something before then. Okay. Yes, bring it back. Okay. We'll bring back a schedule and general plan. Okay, great. All right. Quality core services.
Very simple, done.
For the audience out there, strength and infrastructure, done. Digitizing government services. So improving that accessibility to town code and recodification. Deborah, can you weigh in on where we are in that process?
We're in a bit of a start over phase. First company that we contracted with folded. They handed our product over to another company called American Legal. The product is not what we're looking for. And so we are now looking at Unicode.
Okay.
Gotcha. And our code continues to be codified internally.
Leslie, you're next.
So I wasn't here when this was decided. What I can tell you is that regarding 5-year budget forecasting, that we do have some 5-year forecasts, mostly related to capital currently within the budget. I do personally think that we could refine that and provide some more detail. One of the examples is relating to housing that we spoke about earlier. Additionally, adding some detail regarding the general fund and some forecasting there. So hopefully that will be something that you will see and love in the 2023 budget, and we can continue to refine it from there.
Public engagement, I think we can all agree, even when meetings get this long, there are still people in there hanging out during those hybrid meetings. That's been one of the wonderful things that's come out of the pandemic, and people can actually listen to meetings after the fact as well. Prime Gov has certainly been a huge improvement. Kudos to Brody and Deborah for helping to implement that and continuing to improve technologies. We'll get to that on the next slide again. And then police department, is there something that you'd like to weigh in on, Chief? We can have you come up here if you'd like.
Regarding the retention and recruitment success, I had met with Tony and I wrote up a memo on take-home vehicles. And he wanted me to get with Leslie, so Leslie and I have been working on that. But I would say that the most important thing that we can do for our officers is get them take-home cars. It's their office. We've got 5 cars right now, one's down. We usually have 1 car down. So they're running about 20 hours per day with a vehicle take-home car. I forget what that study was, but there's a study that shows that the amount of maintenance is like cut in half if it's used by 1 officer. So I would say that that's a very important recruitment tool. And then, of course, Jeff, we have RFPs out for the remodel. Go ahead and.
Yeah, actually, that one bids are due next week and the contract will be before council on April 8th.
Thanks, Jeff. And we have been doing a lot of in-house training and also sending officers out to training, and we average about 120 hours per year per officer, where the average department averages about 25 hours per year. So we're like light years ahead. That's all I have.
Thank you, Tom.
Moving into employee retention, recruitment, and employee resources. I believe we all are aware that we are recruiting for a town manager. The goal is to have somebody in place by June 1st. We have just a little bit of details for you. We have reviewed 16 different firms, and we selected 6 that have a proven government recruitment history. And of those 6, we have received 4 proposals, and will be presented to town council in 2 weeks on the 22nd of February with our proposal recruitment firm selections from there. Sticking on the lines with our recruitment and retention strategy, we are clarifying and improving our employee perks. While we all know that pay is a big component, we also know that what's in it for me, a little bit more for employees on the retention as well as the recruitment side is really important. So again, on the 22nd of February, we'll be bringing a proposal on some of those new modified, expanded employee perks. And while it is still winter, summer is right around the corner. We spent a lot of tonight talking about it. So that said, our goal is to have summer seasonal jobs posted by March 1st. So if you know of anybody who wants to come down and be a dock attendant, now's the time to start planning those scenes so that they can apply starting March 1st. We are working with new recruitment job fairs as well as new job boards. And we're researching some aggressive recruitment tactics, because if you heard kind of the theme throughout everything that's going on, we're short-staffed in various different areas. Part of digitizing and government services on our previous slide, that goal for HR is to integrate our HRIS system with our payroll system, with our timekeeping, with our benefits, with our performance management tools, et cetera. Currently, all of our tools that we have are very siloed and very independent from each other with a lot of manual data entry. This integration will help us streamline our workflow as well as ease for our employees in accessing their records when they want to, or their paychecks and such, or change of address. For payroll or benefits, benefit enrollment, all that will become much easier. That process is about an 8 to 10 week implementation process. And we plan hopefully, our goal is to have full integration by June 1st with that. Typically, this time of year, we would host our employee opinion survey. The last one we did was in 2019. Our goal this year is to actually move it to summer, as we are currently down 17 full-time year-round positions, and we want to make sure that we're getting valid data back and departments will actually have results that they can actually do something with. So the other three areas of evaluation is our performance feedback tool, our merit increase process, and our paid time off accrual policy. These processes will all be evaluated a little bit in line with our HRIS system integration, and we'll be researching and proposing new structures as deemed appropriate for the fall budget approval for 2023 as needed. And then the last area of focus on our list is the evaluation of our current benefit broker. We'll be reviewing our current benefit broker with other brokers. We've already done a little bit of work on that. And our hope is that in the spring of 2022 or summer that we may, if deemed appropriate, have a new benefit broker that'll allow us to ensure that we are offering the right benefits at the right cost and that we are evaluating those costs maybe a little bit more with some structure than maybe what we've gotten in the past. That's where we're at there. No, sorry.
They weren't mine.
Sorry.
So moving on to the compensation study, in the time of the Great Resignation, I think we could all recognize that this is a really important thing for the town of Frisco to be undergoing. And we have been paying some close attention and gathering lots of information. I think it's going to turn out really well with lots of data. We expect that in June, we will be able to come to council with some information and a recommendation that we can implement in July. And that won't be a process that is over with in July. You know, with wage inflation, that's something that we will continue to look at regularly and make sure that we are placed correctly in the market to help to attract and retain the best talent, which I think that we're currently doing a great job of, but we want to make sure that we continue to do so. Additionally, while that study is full-time employees, we do also want to look at seasonals and make sure that we're starting off seasonal employees at the right spot. And then that does relate to the compensation study by looking at the compression between the seasonals and the relationship to full-time staff. And then that also relates to the police department as far as retention and attraction of great police officers. They are some of our greatest assets within the town, and it is definitely currently a tough environment to recruit officers. So we want to make sure that we really are retaining our great officers that we currently have and using the best tools. So some of these tools that have been identified is the vehicle take-home policy that the chief mentioned earlier, as well as to make sure that the remodel is moving along to provide a bunk room and a kitchen to our current officers. Along with the vehicles, those are also something that are tough to come by right now. So we do plan to come to you with some strategies regarding purchasing and managing of our fleet overall, and specific to being able to purchase additional vehicles and discuss the benefits of having a take-home vehicle policy.
Overhaul of the fuel system. We are gonna get a RFP out in March to take a look at that. And then alley paving, the final phase, if you remember, we kind of delayed that project for the last 2 years, not knowing what the funding was going to be and what was going to happen with the pandemic. So we have reinstituted, and we did budget this year to finish the alley paving project, which is 3 segments of alley. 2 of them are between 2nd and 3rd Street. One of them is Pine Drive, the continuation of Pine Drive, and the other one is the dirt alley just to the north of that. And I'm sorry, it's late. I cannot remember which. I think it's Pitkin Alley. And then the 3rd one is the alley, Teller Alley from 2nd Avenue to 1st Avenue. Right here, it was half done by developers off of 2nd. We're going to finish it the rest of the way to 1st Avenue. So that's that project. And that'll be done and completed in September. Everything's completed in September, so we don't mess up people's summers.
Technology improvements, let's have Deborah speak to both of those, please.
Thank you so much. In the 2022 budget, we have approved email to cloud and townwide security cameras. The email to cloud is to give us redundancy, increase our storage space, reduce our monthly costs. The townwide security cameras will be on all public facilities. Both of these projects are already in progress. We also will be making a suggestion if council is interested. We have a proposal for additional upgrades to the council chamber technology. There is a proposal ready to go if council is interested in it.
Sound, the big deal. So you don't have to.
I couldn't.
Come again?
Boom. Point made. Still able to laugh at this point, and it's 9. Well done. Townwide security cameras, Diane McBride was the one who was instrumental behind that, along with Tom, and ended up issuing an RFP. Diane did for cameras, and we'll have 50 cameras. It's been a common occurrence. The police department will ask, hey, do you have a recording of this in this spot? And we will say, no, that is a webcam. It does not record. So to that end, 50 security cameras. Boom.
And these new cameras will store for 30 days.
Council chambers. And as most things should end, I guess, with a bathroom. And that is the information center remodel. Bathroom expansion and remodel. We've recently discussed this, interior improvements that came out of that discussion. And then I think really important ADA ramp on the front of the information center. And I'm springing this on some of my colleagues right now that I might be looking to do that this summer, just in the interests of, yeah. I thought at 9 o'clock I could get away with it, but apparently not. But I see myself out there with a trowel right now. So needless to say, that's something that we'll be planning and potentially getting a ramp in there. It would be delightful. So I would just say this in closing, and then I'll get feedback from council again, but I just want to say thank you for entertaining this, and in Diane's absence as well. The last time that we did this was in November 2020. So we did it in November 2019, June 2020, and November 2020. We did these kind of updates to council, and that's the last time it happened. And that's why Diane McBride and our leadership team thought it was so incredibly important to come back with this kind of very thorough list of projects that have been completed and that we're looking to complete in support of goals and priorities. So with that, any other feedback regarding core services? What you heard there, anything you didn't hear tonight beyond?
I'd be in support of looking at the sound and seeing that proposal from Deborah and what's going on there. I think that is important. Helps with some of the inclusivity goals to be heard and available. And then Jeff, quickly on the fuel overhaul, where did we, I don't remember the follow-up conversation where we landed with the direction we're going with that. I just need a reminder on.
Well, we still need to get the new fuel system installed. We've kind of almost lost our fuel management system computer. Joe has spent a lot of time at Public Works over the last month, putting Band-Aids on that thing and keeping it going. With the thought that we had of electric vehicles, and we are still moving forward with the electrification of the fleet. However, we are on a 1.5 to 2 year waiting list for our first F-150 Lightning we were supposed to get this year. We're not going to get that this year, but we're still going to move forward with the design of the infrastructure at the shop for electrical vehicle charging, because that is in the budget this year. Fleet foreman has been looking at training and looking at the tools that will be needed for electric fleet vehicles, which is in the budget for this year. So, but the fuel system, we're not going to get away from not needing that. And we did look at other items like going to gas stations and trying to solve that problem that way. it's not really feasible for what we're trying to do. The county, we talked to them about fueling up over there, but that's even more inefficient because when we get off shift and we're done, we're driving all the way over to County Commons to fuel up and then driving all the way back to the shop to park them and wash them. And so I think that the fuel system is still the way to go. I know we're trying to get away from fossil fuels, but I don't think we're going to anytime soon just because of the heavy equipment we operate and some of the other things we do. So we're getting an RFP out to see what that's going to cost. There is money in the budget for it this year. And as soon as I have more information on costs and what we can do to fix that, we'll come back to you for sure.
Two things quickly. One is because it was raised, the sound in chambers, I would put forth that it be set up so that we can have our workshop at a table in a conversational arrangement as opposed to on a dais with the stilted conversation that results from being in this method as opposed to a workshop method. And then I would be curious, and maybe it was in something, but if we did this in November of 2020, I'd love to see that list kind of with the check marks of done, left undone, forgot about that, oops. Some level of accountability for the list from 2020.
I can't tell you if it exists, but I sure will work on finding it.
Otherwise, why are we doing this if we're not going to be able to go back in a year and see what we did and didn't do?
I think Rick had something.
So I have one thing at the end, Hunter, but on this one, I wanted to be sure that we are going to have a real compensation survey when it comes time for the new town manager interviews and offerings. So if that's not already taken care of, I'd like to move that to the top of the heap so that we're out there offering comparable wages and compensation to our next candidates. One, and then two, I did not know that all of this was going to be in the presentation, but I think it's great. It's time to move forward with the police department remodel. If it's part of taking care of our employees, it's part of retention, it's part of a healthy work environment. Let's go. And with that, I'll save my other comments for the end.
I was just going to respond to the comment about the compensation study. So we do already have comparables related to the town manager. But I also believe that as part of what Olinda is doing regarding selecting recruiters, that would certainly be part of something that they would offer as well. They would have even more advice regarding the total compensation package, because it's not just the salary range. There's lots of other pieces that go into it with negotiating for a town manager. So I believe that we will have a successful recruitment of the recruiter that will help us to lead the compensation package. Thanks.
Anything else?
Okay, that 2 hours of work will render, to your point, Councilman Arison, it will render a project plan where we'll have timelines and something we'll be able to pull out next year when we go through this again, when we revisit all of the things that were put on the plan for 2022. And hopefully we're looking at 2023 and all the cool stuff we're going to do then. So thank you again for all your feedback and attention and lack of food.
Thank you for your closing comment. I think we're there.
Deep in thought.
Oh, sorry, gang. Hey, I got to eat on a bonus. I got to eat even though I'm sick. Hey, I just wanted to not lose focus of when I look at the strategic plan and I look through the packet and I look at what we just went through for the last 2 hours, stuff got done. And it got done by the boots on the ground, and it starts at our department heads and it goes down to the people that are working within their departments. And that's what makes Frisco great. So I wanted to share this with leadership, share this with staff. I really want to get to an all hands meeting to express my appreciation to all the folks. And I know all of councils for everyone's hard work, but wow, it's been a crazy couple of years, but we still kept pushing the rock. And I appreciate all 7 of council and everyone in that room's work towards our end goal of making Frisco a great place to be. So thank you.
Well said, Rick. Yeah, thank you. Anyone wishing to make public comment, anything they've heard? And online still, Kelly, it's not. Open up for public comment. Seeing none, I'll close public comment and no action needs to be done on this. And a motion to adjourn. Thank you so much, everyone. Appreciate it. Have a great night.